We have a short video we'd like to preface begin today's meeting with. Stacy, if you can roll it, please.
My name is Wayne Hamilton. I'm a homeless liaison and community outreach coordinator for the Morongo Unified School District.
I'm Astrid Johnson. I'm on the staff of Morongo Basin ARCH. ARCH stands for Aligning Resources Challenging Homelessness. Short-term rentals are impacting the community by drawing down the available housing.
We're having many families that are being evicted out of their housing so that their owners or property managers can sell the unit for a short-term rental.
The numbers are telling us that it is increasing and that people are finding it more and more difficult to find housing in the area.
A lot of these houses that are sold over the last 2 years have put families out. People don't realize that every one of these houses that are 2, 3, 4 bedrooms, that was probably a rental unit or a family that lived in that dwelling. And now they can't get rehoused.
There are many families that are homeless that contact us. They're living in cars or they're living in abandoned buildings.
As 10% of our students are homeless, that will equal about 700 kids, and that's across all grade levels. The elementary schools that are in Joshua Tree are the most hardest hit because that's where it seems to be the most populated area for people to sell their residence or their rental units.
Of course, there is no cap in Joshua Tree in the county areas. And it's anywhere between 20 to 24% of the homes are now Airbnbs.
A lot of these families are becoming homeless for their first time. The kids are scared, they have nowhere to go. They usually end up either doubled up or they take their life savings and buy an RV, live off the grid out in the middle of the desert with no water, no utilities, no electric. It's just a sad situation. It's really hard to take a kid and put them in that situation. You know what, the numbers show us that it's increasing in the amount of students that we have. We normally run 7 to 10%. Okay, what we do every year, we dump those numbers and we have to start over again by requalifying people for homeless or McKinney-Vento status. Okay, so this year it's increased. We're probably gonna go over the 10% of our student load. I mean, each day we're adding to that number. Okay, we're getting 4 to 5 calls a day for people that are losing housing. They can't find housing. These kids are being transported to schools. They're spending more time on the buses. Their scores are going down. Their lives are being disrupted. Their friendships are being ruined. These kids are our future. I mean, we owe them more to give them a more stable living area or place where they can learn and keep their scores up, keep their grades up, and help them where they can further their education.
Good morning. I'm Steve Bardwell, President of the Morongo Basin Conservation Association. And on behalf of the directors of MBCA, we offer our thanks for you all being here today. Our annual meeting, which marks the 54th year of MBCA, will be focusing entirely on the important issue of housing within the Morongo Basin. To that end, we are pleased and honored to have representatives from a broad spectrum of our community share their insights on how the availability and cost of housing is affecting them. Through the anecdotes and descriptions we will hear today, we hope to further define the housing problem, knowing that to solve a problem, one must first define the problem. We believe protection of the intact desert landscape, plants and view sheds, as well as the wildlife that lives here, should be of prime consideration when making land use and planning decisions. This is crucial for the well-being of our residents, our tourism-based economy, and the health of the planet. MBCA is a volunteer-run nonprofit whose mission is to advocate for the healthy desert environment. Informed land use and planning decisions play a critical role in nurturing the healthy desert environment. Towards that end, MBCA is committed to tracking the many planning and land use issues affecting us. We were active, along with other members of the Morongo Basin communities, in commenting on the recent countywide plan. And were strongly against, as was our supervisor, Don Rowe, against the repeal of the community plans. The repeal of these community plans, these were specific legally adopted land use documents, and their repeal diminishes the voice of our community. The national housing crisis, along with the rapid growth of visitorship associated with social media and Instagram popularity of Joshua Tree, and COVID-19 all coalesced with an explosion of STRs in the Morongo Basin. As we became aware of the strain being placed upon our communities, we began to hear of the effects on the school district, Copper Mountain College, students, the national park, the Marine base, and renters and business owners. We observed the fabric of our community being frayed by this tremendous growth of STRs. In an effort to bring awareness to our local housing crisis, we produced an 8-minute video documenting some of the effects on our communities. The map here behind me provides a visual snapshot of approximately 3,100 STRs in the Morongo Basin. A picture is worth 1,000 words to describe the scale of the phenomenon. Also over here, you'll see a wealth of data on STRs, specifically within our area. Today we will hear of the unmet needs for housing within our community and how to support efforts to identify and construct housing to satisfy those needs. Our climate crisis requires that we build smart to satisfy these needs and guard against the false premise that by building more, we will then solve our housing problems. All housing is not the same. There's a need for the right kind of housing, housing that is in scale with and promotes a healthy and vibrant community. To quote Kome Ajise, who is the executive director of the Southern California Association of Governments, which is a regional planning agency overseeing housing programs, there is an overproduction of market rate housing, but in the low income category, we are underperforming. While MBCA is not an expert on the many complex facets of the housing crisis, we are concerned about the erosion of our economic and societal well-being by unavailable and unaffordable housing. A few words about terminology are in order as we begin our discussion today. The affordability of market rate housing is a different problem from providing affordable housing units. And affordable housing units are different from shelter or transitional housing that rely on a system of providing services. And in discussing short-term rentals, we believe it is important to make the distinction between the locally owned residential scale mom and pop short-term rentals that can contribute to the community versus commercial scale activity that can destroy communities. This disconnect is now being actively debated in the city of Twentynine Palms, where an STR is proposed to be constructed as a boutique hotel. This would clearly be a commercial type use within a residential community. Conflating or confusing these different definitions of affordable housing and the different levels of STR activity muddles the waters and impedes productive conversation so that solutions become difficult to achieve. We must not forget that, and we must not forget that humans are part of the environment and that the environment is changing rapidly. We are facing a climate emergency. When asked what we should do to defend ourselves against this emergency, Bill McKibben, the noted environmental activist, replied, "Live in a strong community." He was then asked, "How do you find a strong community?" To which he replied, "You don't, you build it." We are here today to build our strong community. As the county vision statement states, it's up to us. We wish to thank First World for their hosting of a benefit fundraiser for homeless students in the Morongo Unified School District. This event brought in over $10,000. Today, there is a silent auction of donated artworks and objects to continue that effort. Please bid generously. Over here, we have them all laid out. We will close the auction just after lunch. And please sign up for the open mic after lunch to secure a place to speak. We will give our preferences to nonprofits. And please try to limit your time to 3 to 5 minutes. Lorraine Turk is going to be moderating those discussions, and the sign up is over here in this area. And to Bonnie Hawthorne, who has produced the videos that have served to galvanize the community, thank you for your excellent work. Where are you, Bonnie? And thanks to Terry Quinn for her catering of today's food, and to the town of Yucca Valley and the staff for the use of their facility here. Thank you. So the title of today's program, we chose Gimme Shelter, Seeking Housing Solutions for the Morongo Basin. So our basic agenda is going to be as follows. We're going to first try to identify the issues through anecdotes and experiences from the various portions of the community that are represented here. We're going to talk about some of the current efforts that are being underway in the efforts to housing. Then we'll discuss some paths and a specific path that we have in mind that we think would be appropriate for some solutions. Then we'll have a lunch and then some discussion, open mic discussions as we talked. We're pleased and honored to have members of the community who have experience and involvement with these issues here. And you'll see in our program, there's a listing. Here's pictures. See if you can put the pictures in touch with the names in the program. But, so this, and within our handout here, you'll see the organizations that they are associated with. So let's get into it by first. Let's see if we can't identify the issues. So this, we thought it was appropriate, as I mentioned earlier, all housing is not the same. So we thought it would be helpful to kind of show what different types of housing really we're talking about here. Starting from where we have housing shelters for people that are homeless and need a place to live. That is kind of the lowest, most basic level. Transitional bridge type housing, such as transitional youth housing. Then to permanent supportive housing, and then up to subsidized housing that might involve some sort of a voucher. Then we thought, well, this kind of creates a point where everything above this point might fall into what is known as the American dream, where people can actually afford to live in stable and appropriate housing, where one might be able to buy a starter home, perhaps then where one might be able to buy a single family home. And then up at the upper end of it would be investor or luxury type homes. So it starts to give a sense of that. Now, where this American dream is, it's sort of been moving a little bit over time. as, as housing becomes less available and more expensive. So it's we're all seeing it and hearing so much about this. So we just thought it would be helpful to kind of display this in a basic format such as this. To that end, and describing some anecdotes, we have asked Jennifer Shaumyan of Affordable Rentals in Yucca Valley to share some insights. And we produced a short video of her interaction.
In 2021, we had to let 51 households know that they had to move. And it was a very emotional process for us and for them. I remember a time that I had to tell a tenant that had lived in her home for about 10 years that the owner was selling. And she had 6 kids. And so trying to keep them at the same schools, moving them around to try to find something that was in her price range because she wasn't getting an income increase. And so, it was very emotional. And 6 months later, she actually was in a home that the owner decided to sell as well. And so I had to make that call again to her. What's really sad is the seniors, and there were times where I had to actually let them know that their homes were being sold, and trying to qualify them for new housing at the new rent rate was very difficult. They're on Social Security, maybe making $800 a month, and our minimum requirement for income is 3 times the amount of rent. What we're finding is an influx of people from other areas coming into the Morongo Basin. Even though rent seems to be a bit higher up here nowadays, it's still a lot cheaper than other places in California. So workers that are now working remotely are able to afford it here and be able to get out of the cities and do things. Now, with the local employees, I'm finding that they are not making as much money as, say, people from out of the area, and they are having a harder time qualifying for rentals up here. On a positive.
Good. Thanks. Next, we'd like to have Peter Spurr come up and give us, pardon me. That's right. I understand that Wayne has, we'll have Wayne Hamilton come up here to give us a sense of the homeless needs of the Morongo Unified School District children. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good morning. What a nice turnout. First of all, I want to thank you guys for coming here. Jennifer's a great lady. We worked with her for many years. I'm one of the homeless liaisons at the school district and have been in that capacity for about the last 15 years. Okay, first of all, that's one realtor, okay, that had to tell 52 people last year that they had to move. So if you times that by the many realtors that we have, or even private landowners, some of them have 10, 15 houses that they sold. Okay, so it's really turned into a mess. Okay, so that's a strong message there. Units sold, I did a presentation to the Planning Commission on those units that were sold last year from August to September. I think there was over 500 units. The majority of those units are 2, 3, and 4 bedrooms. So, I mean, those are family houses, people that lived in them. Okay? Some of them were people that retired, moved away, sold their house, and now they're a millionaire somewhere. Okay, a lot of them, I would think at least 30% was families that we have displaced. Okay, so the deal is what they do, and Jennifer touched on a little bit, they get a 60-day notice to move. Okay, 60 days to move because the owner has sold the house or they want to put their family in it. So those are at-will evictions. There's nothing we can do to stop them. Okay, if a person gets an eviction notice because they're behind on their rent, we can usually work with a program to step in there and get that paid, get them settled, and there's no disruption. But when it's for at-will, for selling it, there's no way to stop that, okay? Those people have 60 days to move or be evicted. A lot of them have nowhere to go because of the shortage of the housing out here and the requirements to try to get into housing. Okay, they used to be, when I first started doing this, I'd get 2 and 3 calls a week from a realtor asking if we had somebody that needed a house or an apartment or a place to stay. Now we get 3 to 4 calls a week telling us, hey, we got to evict this family, what can you do for them? Okay, so there's certain things that we can do. Finding housing is darn near impossible. Okay, they're asking for 3 times the amount of rent for income. So if a family works full-time at a minimum hour job, okay, they qualify for a $700 a month unit. That's it. Where are you going to find that? Okay, you're not. They're asking for 3 times, usually double the deposit in the first month's rent. So that's $2,100 a whole month's pay. Okay, then they're also asking for credit above 600, sometimes even higher, 650, 700, and they're asking for a lot of ridiculous things, you know, like work references for a year. Okay, I think the last time that we were here in this room having a meeting, it was for a senior that was losing her house because somebody sold it, and there's no option for it. You know, they get that eviction notice, they got 60 days, the majority of them cannot find a place, and they ride it out. They have nowhere to go. They stay in there until the cops come and physically remove them. Okay? Then we put an eviction on their record for 7 years, which I don't know of a realtor that will rent to somebody with an eviction notice. So, I mean, it's not their fault, okay? It's our fault for making this map over here, okay? So there's some things that we should do. Short-term rentals do some good for the community, I understand that, but don't use existing housing stock. Okay, these people that are coming up here buying up this property, they don't stop bidding until they win, okay? It was a homestead cabin, 10 by 10. No windows, no doors, 5 acres. That thing sold for $350,000. Is that crazy? Okay, so this is the deal. We need to figure out how to not do that. If somebody wants to do a short-term rental and they want to invest in our community, make them develop the property. Okay, number one, it's not going to be in the neighborhood where some people are complaining because they have 10 party houses on the dead-end street. Okay, they have the money to develop. It's going to bring money to the community, it's going to bring money to our school systems, and it's going to give us what we're looking for if you're over on the short-term rental side. Okay, so everybody asked me, what can we do about homelessness? I think our number one thing to do is quit making them. Okay, you can't solve a problem if you keep adding to it faster than there's a resolution. Okay, and that's what we're doing. So let's try to figure out how to stop making homeless people, okay, and then start working on a solution to take the people that we have that are already in that situation and help them get back into housing. Okay. One thing that Jennifer mentioned, that the lady that had 6 children, you know, they're concerned about their kids staying in that school, you know, uprooting them from their daily routine, uprooting them from their friends. Okay, the school district has a legislation that we follow. So if you become homeless for a financial reason, your kids can stay in that school of origin for the remainder of the year if they're in elementary school. If they're in high school, they can stay in that school of origin for the remainder of their time to graduation. Okay, so basically what that means, if you get homeless in Joshua Tree, you have to move to Yucca Valley, we'll bus the kids back to Joshua Tree for the remainder of the year. Okay, so a lot of people don't know that. So if you're faced with somebody that's looking in that direction or facing that problem, have them give us a call. Okay, because a lot of times it gives them the option that they can look out of Yucca Valley to find a place and not disrupt their children's education. Okay, that's one of the things we can do. We can work with them, try to help them get resources. There's money out there to help people get rehoused. The problem is there's no house to spend that money on. Okay, and so we need to take a look at that and see what we can do. Okay, there's a lot of new development going on out here. I see some new triplex, threeplex, fourplex, fiveplex coming up. You know, we didn't have a solution, so some of our local people pulled together to do it. Unfortunately, these are RV encampments that's off the grid. Okay, and eventually the county is going to come up here and make them move. All right, so when you say you don't have homeless people, I do home visits all the time. I put 6 to 7 or 60 to 70,000 miles a year on my car. You can't go up a street anywhere in any community, Sky Harbor, up here on Golden Bee, where you don't see an RV in somebody's driveway that somebody's living in. You can't look out in the desert anywhere along 62 without seeing a bunch of them, okay? So those people we need to get rehoused. We need to stand firm with the county. Don't throw them off that property too. Okay, we need to figure out how we can put a moratorium or remove those evictions that were no fault of theirs. Okay, it's crazy that they're not going to be able to find a house for 7 years because of something that we've done or the community has done. Okay, so how you guys can help, let everybody know that the school district can help keep the kids in that school of origin. The point in time count's coming up, so usually we have about 6 hours to count everybody in the basin. So this year, they let us include those people that are off the grid in those RVs. Okay, those can be counted, and we have 7 days to do the whole count. So what we're looking at, 170 people, I'm sure it's going to be a little bit higher. Okay, so thanks for everybody. I got to run. Please work on these things.
Thank you so much, Wayne. That's great to hear. Now, we would like to hear from Peter Spurr, local realtor, who's going to give us a overview of issues in the real estate market. Peter Spurr.
As you just heard, my name is Peter Spurr. I'm a real estate broker associate at Joshua Tree Realty. I've been with Joshua Tree Realty since 2004, so in August it will be 19 years. I have no experience in the local real estate market prior to 2004, and I'm here today only offering my personal opinion regarding housing issues. Statistical data is available for those interested, but like anything else, it can be difficult to interpret and isn't without inaccuracies. In my opinion, it might not be anything novel in this regard. It's basically that an unregulated market can be chaotic, and I think we've all witnessed that recently. I don't currently manage rentals, but I have extensive experience in the field. And the last big downturn in the real estate market, it was historic, and most can recall the subprime mortgage meltdown about 13 years ago. Properties became incredibly cheap, and investors bought many, converting them into standard long-term rentals, oftentimes renting them to military personnel or families. I personally sold hundreds of foreclosures over the course of a few years, and I'm just one agent. There were many other agents also selling distressed properties. Understandably, there soon resulted in oversupply of rentals and rents lowered accordingly because of the price competition. And the landlord experience oftentimes wasn't good, with bad tenant stories, unpaid rent, damaged properties, and the like being quite common. Then the short-term rental thing happened. Airbnb and other platforms became available and gained in popularity quickly. With inexpensive homes, anyone could invest in a property and with some cosmetic renovation soon have a property ready for rental revenue and getting more rental revenue and still offer the owner access to the property when not rented. This was very appealing. For a community near a national park, it isn't surprising that these platforms gained momentum, and soon the short-term rentals were favored by most owners, with very few opting to buy a property for long-term rental. This conversion from long-term rental to short-term rentals kept up for years. However, the drive for short-term rental ownership really exploded in popularity when COVID-19 pandemic made air travel impractical. The high desert's proximity to the rest of Southern California created a drivable destination, which was important. This increased visitorship, and with the many new short-term rentals, there was plenty of lodging to accommodate these visitors. Owners talked of high occupancy rates and grossing high revenues during this time. Couple this incentive with historically low interest rates, and the rush to own a vacation property in the high desert happened. This fever for acquiring STR properties in our area was without precedent. Properties listed for sale saw multiple offers, many over asking price. More than a few residential property owners, myself included, would be solicited to sell their unlisted property via text message, phone call, postcard, etc. This resulted in many unused properties that otherwise sat vacant also becoming STRs, and then were cosmetically improved and brought to market to capture a high dollar sale. Sellers during this time were rewarded with never before seen sales prices, some exceeding $1 million. Prior to the last real estate boom, sales over $1 million were almost non-existent. In the last 800 days, so a little less than 3 years, the MLS shows 28 home sales exceeding $1 million, and that's in Joshua Tree alone. This doesn't even take into account Yucca Valley, Morongo Valley, 29 Palms, Flamingo Heights, Landers. When the news of these high-dollar sales began to reach the masses, the predictable effect began. Properties with tenants earning lower rents were soon converted to short-term rental or vacated to be sold to become a short-term rental. Affordable rents were becoming a thing of the past. Anyone looking to rent in our area during 2021 and the first half of 2022 experienced big frustration and disappointment securing housing. Anyone evicted from a long-term rental was in for a difficult time for finding affordable replacement housing. Another casualty of the short-term rental boom was first-time home buyers not being able to compete for the available housing stock. Routinely, buyers with financing that included FHA, VA, USDA, or other government-backed mortgages were rejected in favor of the cash-heavy offers from the investors. Things finally came to a head in mid to late 2022 when the Federal Reserve initiated inflation curbing measures and more than doubled the interest rates. With higher interest rates, higher sales prices, and an oversupply of short-term rentals, the fever to own vacation rental properties finally broke. STR owners cited dismal rental earnings. Values stopped rising. Soon the STR vacancy problems have made owning a long-term rental attractive again. On a side note, some of the newer built homes were designed and built for weekend use. They are characterized by limited square footage, usually a carport instead of a garage. Some are like studio-like and have small laundry facilities, if any. They are not ideal for long-term rentals for these very reasons. As of Monday, January 16th, the MLS showed over 135 single-family home listings in Joshua Tree, approximately 4 times that of what was typical in late 2021. This oversupply of active listings with very few buyers in the marketplace is forcing price reductions by motivated sellers. Price reductions are commonplace. Additionally, first-time home buyers and other buyers with government-backed mortgages, such as the FHA, VA, and USDA financing, among others, are able to get their offers accepted now with little competition. And that is all I have got to say on what happened. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. That's quite a story, and up and down in just a couple of years. At this point, I'd like to invite our 3rd District Supervisor, Don Rowe, newly elected Chair of the Board of Supervisors, up here to present some insights on the housing here in the Morongo Basin. Thank you, Don.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here today. So Steve had asked me to pull together a bunch of different statistics, some of which relate to the county, some of which are national. So as we go through the slides, I'll try to explain what we have here. Our first slide that we have, we talk about housing statistics and demographics. So in this slide, and this was put together by what we call the Morongo CCD, which stands for the Census County Division. So they group the data together by this area. So this is not how we at the county define a geographic area. When I looked at it and thought, why are we doing Twentynine and Yucca together? What happened to Yucca Morongo? It includes all of it by the Census Bureau. And this census study is done in 4-year estimates, so we can't really break it out. But the total housing units is almost 39,000, and of those housing units, the owner-occupieds are 14,666, and the renter-occupied were 12,127. And the graph, it shows down the breakdown, which I thought was interesting and maybe disputable. When you look at the number of bedrooms, I'm not sure I could count 2,318 zero bedrooms. So we have had a few rec cabin conversions. We have some apartments that have studios or efficiencies, but I don't think we have 2,300. So I'm not really sure where those numbers come from. They are the census, not the county. So moving on to the next slide. Home prices. So national housing prices trends, according to the University of California at Riverside, the overall housing supply remains very tight, and we do not have the vast swaths of excess supplies in the system like we did in 2008, like Peter's slide showed that spike at the end there. The building industry has really not recovered to catch up with full demand since that housing turn. So this one was an interesting slide. So these are hotel motels just in the unincorporated area of San Bernardino County. So the graph shows the breakdown between the hotel motel units, and there are 8 of them with a total of 143 units in the unincorporated area. And so with over 3 million visitors to the park and our national monuments each year, it's just really not enough to keep up with the demand that we have for visitors. They just don't come for the day and turn around and go back. And so in addition to all the reasons that Peter listed why we had the demand for the vacation rentals, this is another reason for it is the lack of hotel rooms. So community population growth since 2016, and Steve has this entire slide deck and can make it available to anybody that needs it, wants it. Some of these will be a little bit of an eye test from the back. So we can't break this down beyond what it is here. So I tried to do communities to clump them together, but community population year over year, starting with 2016 and then projected out. So you can kind of take a look at where the different communities are in terms of the census, in terms of population. Point in time count, as we heard Wayne talk about, it is coming up. So there are a couple things to remember with a point in time count. It is a snapshot in time of that moment. So there are and could be likely more people than what you see captured here. What we're doing this year to extend the time period that we study those that are unsheltered, unhoused, will hopefully have a more accurate prediction into the future of the way we're doing it this year. So, Claire, if you can go back real quick. It's hard to see, but Morongo is the yellow line at the bottom. They just started tracking landers in 2020. That's the blue line. Then the pink line at the top is Yucca Valley, 29 Palms in the middle. So it's not real consistent. It is up and it is down, and time will tell as we have more data points to include. So this slide shows the school enrollment for the Morongo Basin Unified School District. And we received this information from the school district, and so their enrollment trends are trending downward. And that is also in line with the state numbers. So we see a statewide enrollment is down 1.8% from the prior year, which follows a decline in public enrollment schools even nationwide. So not my place to speculate why that's happening, but enrollment is down everywhere. The next slide, we get into some short-term vacation rental information. So this one, we have a graph that shows the number of new short-term vacation rental permits issued each year. So one of the things that changed this past year is that renewals do not change when or permits do not go with the house when the house sells. So if you are wanting to sell your vacation rental and sell it to someone else, the permit doesn't automatically transfer. And the county did that for several reasons. We want folks to understand that they're getting into sort of a non-conforming business in a residential neighborhood, what that impact is to their neighbors, whether it's trash, noise, light pollution, illegal parking, and whatnot. And so the new owners have to apply for that permit, and there is no guarantee that they get the permit. And so this data point going forward will be more accurate because you have renewals involved as well as permitting in this. So going forward, it will be year over year, we'll be able to tell how many on the steady increase or decrease, and we are seeing a decrease in our short-term vacation rental permits right now. The next slide shows this is unincorporated only, so you're going to see communities of Yucca and Twentynine up there, but this is the outskirts of those not within the city limits. These are our current active vacation rental permits in the entire Morongo Basin, with obviously Joshua Tree at 834. So this side shows that the county, so when we had a short-term vacation rental ordinance revised recently, one of our biggest problems was illegal people not applying for a county permit, just kind of doing it on their own. And so this chart will show that in 2021, code enforcement identified that there were 400 illegal short-term vacation rentals operating. 391 of those 400 have been brought into compliance or have stopped operating as a short-term vacation rental. 9 of those are still problems that code enforcement is working through. The illegal short-term market, like we police, it's one of the few areas that we actively police. Code enforcement in the county is typically reactive. In code enforcement for short-term vacation rentals, it is a combination of those that get reported to us for being illegal and those which we mine through data on various platforms, and we cross with permits. So we are actively pursuing them to shut them down, the illegal operators. So the current open cases of illegal short-term vacation rentals stands at 32. And if you do know of any that are continuing to operate that we've missed at the county, please let me or anyone at the county in code enforcement know. Residential building permits. So this will not break down whether it is a single-family residence or multifamily. It does separate out commercial. So this is just residential living in the Morongo Basin. These are the trends over the last 3 years, and we have seen permits increase in most areas over the last 2 years. So kind of give a second to digest that if you want to go back. All right, and then on the next slide, So as Steve said, we struggle with definitions in bureaucracies. So affordable housing, what I learned when I got to the county level, is not really affordable. Our cheapest, when we talk about like the per door cost for affordable housing units, that we were dealing with at the county was anywhere from $400,000 to $450,000 per door on these type of units that you see up here, which is astounding in terms of the cost that goes into it. It's federal, state, and local money that provides for these affordable housing. Now, it is affordable for the residents that are able to move in there, but when we look at it as taxpayer dollars and how do we fund, we've gone to more of the motel hotel conversion to truly make them affordable from the taxpayer dollar perspective as well as the residents' perspective. And so if we can just leave that up there a little bit. Frank, I always think of you in the granny panties with our one here, our National Core project that was done when several of us were on the council at that time through redevelopment that existed back in the day, dollars that were used there that still is a very nice looking building that our residents enjoy for seniors to have affordable living. And then all of the others, we broke it down by community there. So shelters and transitional housing units. Morongo Basin Arch, thank you very much. We have a number of organizations that do shelters and transitional housing units. There are 6 shelter programs that utilize county funds, and they are registered with the Federal Home Management Information System. And there also could be others operating outside of the county funds area. Those would just not be in my purview, so this slide reflects those that are affiliated with the county. And that is it for the information that you asked me for. I think I got most of it, if not all of it.
Very
So,
good.
thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Don. Thank you, Don. That is very impressive. And just some very eye-opening stats there. So $450,000 a door for affordable housing. It's for those of us that are familiar with building, we know that building costs are high and are expensive. It is expensive to build, and that is reflected there. Wow, that's staggering. With that, I'd like to ask David Smith to come up and give us some insight and thoughts about how the housing crisis has affected the park.
Thanks, Steve. Don, I always love listening to you. It's always a good presentation. And Steve, it's really nice to see you and Sarah up here. We're really lucky to have both of you in this community. So thanks so much. Yeah, let's give Steve a round of applause. So, and Sarah, wherever she is. I was just struck when John and I bought our first house. It was 1998. We were trying to adopt. And we were living inside the park at the time, and there was no phone service inside the park. And the county said, you have to have a telephone if you want to adopt, because it was kind of before cell phones. So we came up to 29 Palms, and we bought our house. It was a 2-bedroom adobe on Gorgonio. It was nice, you know, it was decent. We bought it for $16,000. And so it was a $16,000 telephone, but it was very, very... It was very conceivable that at that time you could purchase a house. So I think we were like GS5s. We were bringing in $50,000 a year at the time between the two of us. It was really, really affordable. You know, when I came back here as park superintendent, every house I was looking at was like, you know, $250,000, $300,000. And luckily, you know, we had the income to pay for it. But most of the staff that I have, that was way beyond their ability. So, you know, we have about 140 employees that work inside the national park. They all live here for the most part. We have a handful that commute from Palm Springs or that area or Desert Hot Springs every day. We have about 10 housing units inside the park that they can live in, but the rent for that is based on, well, it's a weird way they finagle it, but it's on Palm Springs prices and it's on Scottsdale, Arizona prices. So the rent that staff pays inside the park, it's you know, $1,200 to $1,500 a month for residents. So if you're earning $30,000 a year, that's a big chunk of your income for a ranger that's going into that. I just hired a new woman. She's hoping to move to 29 Palms out of Landers, where she is right now. And it's a good paying job. It's a GS5. It's $35,000 a year. And as one of the previous speakers said, she can't rent a place in 29 Palms because, 3 times the rent is more than the money she's bringing home. And this is a woman with a master's. She's well educated. She's got a good federal job with benefits, and she cannot rent a house or a 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom here. So that's kind of an interesting perspective for me as a land manager. I've got 140 people that I got to get in houses each year, and there's not enough housing in the community for them to be at. So during fire season and during the spring, sometimes I'll have staff members who are living in the back of their truck out on public land, and they'll come into work early so they can take a shower, like many people do. Luckily we have showers at work so they can shower there, but they're generally young. They're generally working fires, so they're bringing in a lot of good hazard pay. But here we are, permanent federal employees that cannot afford a house. So that's my concern. I've been trying to build more housing units inside the park, but the federal government, as we know, is a very bureaucratic, challenging organization to work with. Luckily, I have good partners like Daren down here, who is coming up with these ideas like, man, can we build little houses for your staff and use my students at the community college who are learning the trades? And can we partner maybe with a group like MDLT on some of their land? Because I know the federal regulations are going to make it so hard to actually build a house, it'll be impossible. It'll be 15 years by the time we get it done. So there are discussions that I'm engaged in right now trying to figure out ways that I can house my staff. But it's an active concern. Some of you may know I'm being transferred up to San Francisco. That is a big concern for, I got 300 employees up there. I don't know how they can survive in San Francisco. So they're getting on the BART, and they're going on an hour and a half on a train each day to get a place to live. I wanted to talk a little bit about our visitors coming into the park. Some of the graphs that we saw from Peter indicate that we started to see a significant change in housing right around 2013, 2014, 2015. That's when folks really started coming out to Joshua Tree. That's when we started seeing that explosive growth. And people come out to this place and they say, wow, this is a really cool place. This is really fun. Pioneer Town, oh my gosh, this is so neat. And Joshua Tree, it's so hip. And look at all these cool musicians and all these hemp products and all this tie-dye. And I want to live here. So the park, I fear, the joy that people have in coming out here and discovering this place is the impetus for a lot of the challenges that we've been having in the Morongo Basin. We live in a really beautiful area that people want to be a part of, and that is part of the problem. If we lived in an uglier area, we would benefit from that, but we don't. We live in a pretty area, and it's funny, but it's something we have to think about. People are going to continue to want to be in this area. We're not seeing a change in our visitation trends at the park. We're still right around 3.1 million people coming in. There's still a lot of talk. I talk to visitors all the time like, wow, I want to come out here and live. So there's still that demand. So we're going to need more housing units if we want to continue to deal with this and not see the market repercussions of what's happening to rental prices and housing prices in general throughout the area. And just one other observation. During the beginning of the pandemic, for the first time ever, we began seeing folks that are unhoused, coming into the park looking for a place to live. So our campground's relatively cheap. If you're a senior or you're disabled, you can get a spot for $10 a night. So for $300, you can stay in the park. So that was happening. So we saw people, and obviously that are living out of their RVs, not wealthy seniors who have retired in their Winnebagos, but families that are trying to survive. We saw an increase of that population. I also saw on the exterior of the park, specifically down on the Riverside County of the park, large compounds of people living on public lands. So down kind of by Cottonwood, along the dirt roads there, you go out there and it's a little bit of Mad Max. Lots and lots and lots of folks living out there. There's no place for human waste to go. They're all off the grid. I talked to my BLM brothers and sisters to try to figure out, you got to think about toilets down here. You got to think about trash receptacles. All these, it affects the desert tortoise. It affects the water supply. It affects, public health. These are challenges that are happening on public land, not to the same extent that we see when we go to Los Angeles or Anaheim or along the LA River, but it is happening inside the park. In 49 Palms, we've had one or two families living up, behind Stater Brothers. We've had a couple living up near Black Rock, but by and large, the park is not the most hospitable place to take up long-term residents, especially in the summer. So my successor, Jane Rogers is going to be filling in for me as superintendent for a while. She recognizes these needs. She will continue to push for more housing for staff so that we don't impact the local community. But I just, warning there, we're going to have more people that want to come to this area. And whether that's sustainable or not, I don't know from a water and an energy standpoint, but there is going to be more demand for housing, and that is going to influence the prices that are here. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, David. We will miss you. It's very, very nice insights. So this is one of the National Park, one of our primary employers and members of our community. The other, of course, is our base, our Marine base in 29 Palms. And with that, I'd like to ask Colonel Matt Bain to give us some insight from their viewpoint.
Thanks, I'm a colonel, and it's dangerous to give us a microphone. I've got some slides to keep me on time here. So, like I said, Matt Bain, I'm the Director of Installation Support for Marine Air Ground Task Force Training Command. I'm here with Aaron Adams, our Director of Government External Support. First, I want to say we're both grateful for the opportunity to participate in this important discussion. Housing is a big deal for us. So just a quick note on the agenda, like I said, I don't have much time, but I do want to we have a kind of a diverse audience here. I want, for those who don't understand what we do at the Combat Center, to kind of get a sense for what the Marines do here in the high desert. So if I get the next slide. So this is the vision of our command, and basically what we do is we provide the most rigorous, advanced in individual and collective training. And by collective training, that means large formations, battalions, regiments, divisions with the air wing maneuvering together in the desert to basically get ready to win our nation's battles. Next slide. And this eye chart just shows the scope of that responsibility. My boss, Major General Austin Sparky Renforth, if you ever meet him in person, I know a lot of you probably have. He doesn't know who that Austin guy is, so call him Sparky. But those 9 commands are spread across both coasts, the Mountain Warfare Training Center up in Bridgeport, Mott's one in Yuma, Arizona. So it's a big portfolio, and we train folks in advanced aviation, advanced logistics, advanced combat operations, and then we bring it all together in our 1,200-mile training complex to do combined arms fire maneuver to basically give you, the taxpayer, the best trained Marines you can possibly get. But the other mission we have is we're a base command. So we own 2 bases, the one here at 29 Palms and then the one at Bridgeport. And so part of that mission is to ensure those folks have great quality of life. And so 7th Marines, for example, from 1st Marine Expeditionary Force is a major tenet of ours. But pretty much every unit in the Marine Corps will at some point in its life cycle come through the Combat Center for training. Next slide. Our community impact is pretty big out in 29 Palms. So Aaron and I were sidebarring here when the population charts came up. We're looking at how big the population in 29 Palms is compared to Yucca, but when you drive down the main drag in Yucca, you see like Walmart. You don't see that in 29. Well, the base is probably half that blue line, as Frank I'm sure gets, and we have a lot of infrastructure on the base. Big impact to the local community, about $1 billion a year. A lot of the folks in 29 Palms work on the Combat Center. So what that means is, like any decisions that we make on the Combat Center, when it's housing, pay, benefits, employment, programs, units, ripple effects through this entire community. And so we want to be good partners with all of you on that. Next slide. So just kind of get a sense of a scale of the combat center. So I've got over 7,000 bed spaces for permanently assigned junior Marines, 2,200 family housing units between on-base and off-base, over 1,700 other buildings, and then we run our own utilities program, wastewater, water treatment, power generation, and then we're also a customer of gas and electric from the local utility. So it's a big thing. We have a lot of like resiliency targets from the Department of the Defense, where they want us to be able to operate without public utility support for up to 2 weeks in some cases. So there's a lot of effort to be resilient there. Next slide. So kind of starting to get to the meat of our housing situation, and there's a lot of information on this one slide, but our two housing areas, we have about 1,600 units on base and 600 units in the local community at the Vista del Sol housing area. So when I moved here in 2020, occupancy in all of those areas was about 98%. So our housing was pretty full. The 2% just accounted for the move in, move out, wait list stuff, right? Here in 2022, we're down about 80% for the on-base housing and about 70% in the Vista del Sol community. So when occupancy is this low, our housing partner, Liberty Military Housing, they're authorized to what we call a waterfall. So other authorized patrons, so the first thing is DoD civilians, contractors, Liberty employees, veterans, retirees. So we've started that program in the Vista del Sol community, and it was a little bit of a slow start until they started offering some incentives recently for move-in. So folks in those categories, that is a good place for affordable housing. At this point, we have about 23 people living there right now. Our waiting list on the left side of the slide, when I got to 29 Palms, 6-8 months. Now, like, the only time you're waiting for a house is if you're like a colonel with 7 kids like I have. So it's generally just the senior folks, because it's just a limited supply of housing, and it's kind of billet by billet turnover. But generally, there's no wait for housing for Marines coming in, which is a good thing in some respects. So next slide. We have a huge bachelor population. So I mentioned I had 7,000 beds for bachelors, men and women on base. Those are the barracks, essentially. I'm only about half occupied right now, and some of you may be familiar with all the Marine Corps' modernization efforts over the last several years. General Berger it's called forced design, but the effect on 29 Palms is we've lost some units. We've lost a tank battalion, we've lost a Marine Wing Support Squadron, we've lost a company of armored vehicles. So less folks, less units, so we have a lot of search space. And then we have a lot of students as well. So 2,000 students from the Marine Corps Communication Electronics School. That's the largest entry-level MOS training school in the Marine Corps after boot camp. So that's contributes to that about half of that blue line on the 29 Palms. Next slide, please. So as most of you probably know, what people can afford for rent, what people want to charge for rent. Well, you look at this big population in 29 Palms of Marines, like, well, what can they afford? They're a big part of the demand signal. Well, our basic allowance for housing, or BAH, is basically part of every Marine's pay, but it's based on where you live, right? And it's intended to cover 95% of rent and utilities like water, power, gas, and trash services, right? So it's more than just the rent. It's supposed to cover utilities too. And we know utilities have inflated as well as housing prices. But you can see from 2020 to 2023, the rates that just came out in January this month, how much they've changed. Like for a major, from 2020 to 2023, they're basically double. And just kind of for context, when I moved here in 2020, the basic allowance for housing here was similar to the basic allowance for housing in Eastern North Carolina, kind of a rural Camp Lejeune, if you guys are familiar with the commercials, right? So, all right, next slide. So we also have a lot of families in our community, or about 10%. You know, I said we have about 10,000 Marines and sailors on the combat center on average. That does not include our civilian workforce, but about 1,100 of are living in the community. And you can see on this slide kind of how they break down, mostly in Twentynine Palms, about 1,000 of them in Twentynine Palms, but many as far away as Palm Desert, Morongo Valley, Palm Springs, Cathedral City. Next slide. So the amount of base housing, I said we had 2,200 units. Okay, so there is a bureaucratic federal government program that comes down here to determine how many base housing units you need. So that's one study we have. The other one is the study that they do every year to determine the BAH rates, right? So the study that looked at how much base housing we need starts with how much housing is available in the area, and it has to be within a 1-hour commute, which you can see on the black line on the slide around Twentynine Palms. Now, you know, going east, how many houses are there? Right? None until Arizona, I don't think. So one of the things, that black line has been shrinking over years, you know, because of development, right? So they come out here and they drive that route 4 or 5 times, take the average. And when we add a traffic light, when there's traffic jam, they do it at normal commuting hours, so it gets shorter. So the inventory in that bubble has shrunk over time, but that's a different study than the one that sets the BAH rate, which looks at affordable housing at different pay grades. And when they're looking at the data, when it becomes a vacation rental, they can't use that data, right? That's excluded. Furnished housing is excluded from the study. Temporary things like mobile homes, not in the study. So it's got to be, you know, brick and mortar family housing that goes into that study. So they need a certain amount of data at each sort of phase of life, like the major with 4 kids versus like a corporal that just got married, right? So they're having to go all the way into Palm Springs now to get enough data to set our rates, right? So that's that red line on the bottom, right? So those two areas aren't the same, but housing costs go up as you go to the coast, right? So that's helped driving those BAH rates higher, in addition to the cost growth here locally. So next slide. So this is some of the raw numbers from our recent housing allowance, and I don't mean to get into the eye chart of it, but 2 numbers. Kind of the key takeaway is one of the reasons why we have 2,200 housing units on base for families is there's not enough housing in the area, right? So like the national park wants to build houses to address that, so their folks aren't trying to get into the difficult market. The federal government is trying to do the same thing with Marines. But with BAH up, folks are looking for amenities. You know, they're looking for housing. So now you have more Marines interested in living off base as they can afford properties in West Yucca or in Cathedral City or Palm Springs. And the other thing is we have another population of bachelors. So if you're a staff sergeant or higher, you can't live in the barracks, and if you're not married, you can't get a housing on base except under the waterfall program. So those folks are looking for apartments and things like that in Twentynine Palms, and you can see on there the shortfall in the community is well over 200 just for those folks. So those are folks that end up trying to live in my RV park full-time on base, or in our geo-bachelor housing, which is kind of like a cheap hotel sort of system. So next slide. So this is where I'm going to wrap it up, is some key takeaways. But the first one is with BAH going up, it's pushing more and more people to want to live on the community. When I got here, I couldn't find even rental properties didn't exist. It wasn't even about having enough money. It was, they just weren't there, right? I was even willing to spend above my housing allowance, couldn't find it, was able to get a house on base. It worked out really well. Now folks are getting a more appropriate BAH level for the rent around here, so they're looking out on the economy. But the lack of supply is pushing them further and further away, which continues to drive up our BAH rates. And the last thing I want to say, I don't often get the opportunity to talk to the community, but on behalf of Major General Renforth and all the Marines at the Combat Center, I just want to tell you thanks for the support of the Marines and sailors at the Combat Center. We feel it every day. It's great to be a part of this community, and I'm looking forward to the discussion later today. Hopefully we can get after some of these problems. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Colonel Bain. That's very enlightening to hear. And with that, another neighbor, another member of the community we'd like to hear from is Copper Mountain College. So I'd like to introduce Daren Otten, the college president.
It is really great to see everybody here who's, joined this room today to talk about a challenge that I think impacts various constituent groups across the entire basin. I am Daren Otten. I'm the superintendent president at Copper Mountain College. I've been there 3.5 years. And I'd like for you to walk with me just for a second back to me joining your community. It was 4 years ago that I found out about the opportunity here at Copper Mountain College. And as you do, you start looking at real estate, right? When you start looking at a new job and an opportunity to move to a new community. And so it was literally 4 years ago. It was late January, early February of 2019. Now, if you looked at that original slideshow, there had been already a pretty dramatic market change. But what was interesting is I've reflected on even the conversation today with myself. My wife and I started looking at various opportunities to purchase a home. And when I ultimately got the job, things happened very quickly. And so I moved in my RV out to 29 Palms and lived in the RV park there in 29 Palms for roughly the first several months of my tenure at Copper Mountain College. At the time, we were selling a home up north that would help us fund the purchase of a home in the community. And the homes that we had looked at in February and in March were still available. And that was something that one of the homes that we really liked was still there. And as a matter of fact, the prices had started to drop in the marketplace that we were looking at. And that obviously has dramatically changed over the last several years. Even in the short time that I've been here, I've seen the neighborhood change extreme levels of change, even on my street. If you go, I am a resident of Joshua Tree, smack dab in the red big cluster. And I am not standing up here telling you that all short-term rentals are a bad thing. My neighbor in Joshua Tree partially funds his house. He lives in it, but he partially funds it by short-term renting it on the weekends, especially this time of year. He's an artist. That's how he does it. It works for him. But my street is overpopulated with short-term rentals for sure. But I want to kind of take it to the college perspective. We roughly are 120 full-time employees, another 100 part-time employees. We hired a manager this last year, and so our management team is well compensated. They are reasonable when they come into the community to start looking for rentals. Generally is where most of them start. Some of them move right into trying to purchase a home if they move to the community. But we moved a dean from Los Angeles to here when he took the job, and he and his wife were unable to find a rental that was available for them and their children when they moved here this last July. They actually bounced between several different short-term rentals before they were able to find a longer-term rental, which they're now in. But the impact is across the entire spectrum And for us, there's an employee concern, and there's a growing employee concern about affordable housing for our employee group as well. Even though we are a very good employer that pays reasonable wages, but I will acknowledge that our wage structure is not kept up with property values within the community. On the inverse side of this, we also have our student population. We have roughly 1,500 students per semester that enroll in Copper Mountain College. Like all colleges across the state of California, our enrollment from pre-pandemic dropped. Now, we have not dropped like many of the institutions across the state, but we're down roughly 15% pre-pandemic numbers. Our largest feeder, as you would assume, is Morongo Unified School District, and as Dawn shared in her slides, and as Morongo Unified continues to share with us, enrollment has declined there. That pipeline directly impacts the enrollment at Copper Mountain College. Roughly 25% of the graduating high school seniors come directly to Copper Mountain College. And so you're talking about a direct correlation of that pipeline, and that pipeline is eroded because partially families got a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, a windfall of money in some cases if they'd owned their homes for a long time, and they moved to places that were less expensive. That includes our employee groups. We've had several employees who have decided it was time for them to retire, who choose places like Oklahoma and Tennessee, and places that are generally more affordable. But what we haven't seen are families that move back in. And so that's affecting all of us on the front of kind of a student basis. Our average age of student has actually climbed a little bit after years of declining. And I think that tells you a little bit about our population around that. Now, we track homeless students, just like the Morongo Unified does as well. And our population of homeless students definitely is something that has stayed pretty steady. But one of the interesting things about how they track homeless students in college environments is that if you're couch surfing, generally you're not caught. And for anybody who's spent any time in higher education at one point or another, you probably bounced around somebody's extra spare bedroom or futon at the time, right? And so that number isn't necessarily a great connection for us to understand kind of the challenges that we face. But I will say that because we haven't seen families who are moving in, pipelining into Morongo Unified, or families and community members moving in who then would take advantage of the educational opportunities at Copper Mountain, our enrollment, as I mentioned, has declined. Now, we did find the floor in our enrollment this last summer, and we're up about 7% roughly since then. Our fall term was up about 9%. Our spring enrollment, spring semester hasn't started quite yet, so we're still tracking that. We expect it to grow a little bit, but right now we're up about 6%. We'll probably, level out in there somewhere. So we're coming back a little bit. But our concern around the affordable housing in the community is the long-term implications of this. We recognize that, frankly, for us to be sustainable as an institution, we most likely are going to have to look at students who are not necessarily from the community to ensure that we have a funding level that is adequate to support a community college. Copper Mountain College was built on the idea that someday it would be 4,000 students, and we've never even hit 2,000 students. And if Copper Mountain College is about 21 years old, so that gives you some context of where we're at. To that end, we see that potential growth coming through, first and foremost, very distinct programs. We continue to expand in areas that we look at that say, okay, what is an opportunity for students to come here? That may be desert resource management, that may be solar, wind, water. Those are the types of programs that we see opportunities in, specifically because of our neighborhood, that I think as we kind of scale to the desert Southwest, we see very good career opportunities for students long-term. We look at athletics. As many of you know, we added volleyball this last year alongside our men's and women's basketball team, and there's continued opportunity to look at students that will come from out of the area. We are limited because of housing concerns on that space. Joshua Tree is a thing. As many of you know, people want to come here. This whole area people want to come to, and so students who are interested in coming here can't find a place to live. So we are currently in the process of actually undertaking a housing study. We contracted this last year. We received a grant from the state of California to do so. And we are in the process of currently meeting with stakeholder groups. And those stakeholder groups are already sometimes people who are coming from out of the area for school and education at Copper Mountain College. Nursing program. Many of our nursing students commute from the low desert, from north of here, because for nurses, you go to school wherever you can get in. Our wildland fire program. Our wildland fire program, students come from all over. At a minimum, they have to do at least part of that time in residence. Continue to have conversations with David at the park on solving some of those challenges, fire housing, et cetera, having conversations with local hoteliers. Well, that's also an option. But these are the challenges, of course, because there isn't enough hotel rooms, especially during the time of year that we're running our wildland fire academies, which are typically in the wintertime, which is when all the rooms are booked. Because when our wildland fire folks need it, generally in the summer. So as we look at kind of this baseline of housing from a student perspective, and you go back to that introduction of Maslow many years ago, right? If we don't have basic shelter, education's not an option. If folks aren't eating, education's not an option. And at the end of the day, an educated population benefits all of us in this community, right? And so that's really kind of where I want to wrap this up. And from our standpoint as a college, it is critical that we address housing infrastructure, both from the sustainability of our institution, but also really to ensure that our community remains our community. Because Copper Mountain Community College is your college. It's not mine. It's your college. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Daren. Appreciate that. And I think it's appropriate ending on that word community, because that is such a, as we've been saying, such a key part of our discussion today. Now I'd like to invite up David Daniels from the MUSD to talk about the effects housing is having on the Unified School District. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. As mentioned, I'm David Daniels from Morongo Unified School District. I'm the Director of Maintenance and Operations and Facilities with our district, and am well familiar with some of the issues that we deal with on a regular basis. This first slide here indicates and goes a little bit more into depth what's been touched and mentioned on today, which is about our district-wide enrollment history. It goes back to our 2017-2018 school year, which is what we're kind of largely referring to here with some of the things that were mentioned about this explosion in 2018. If you look at from that date just to our 2019-2020 year, there's about a 13% decline in enrollment. When we take it a little bit further from the 21-22 to 21-20, from those times, we got about a 5% nexus there. And then when we look at the 2021-22 school year to the 2022-23 school year, we're looking at a 2.5% increase. Looking onto our next slide, it's important to note that there's a difference between school enrollment and also what we call ADA, which is our average daily attendance. So enrollment is the amount or group of students that are actually enrolled at the school. Those that actually come to school on a daily basis is our attendance. So the school districts get funded based on attendance. We get funded as to who's actually in the seats. And but there is a direct correlation between those two, because obviously you have to have the enrollment to be able to get the ADA, to be able to get the funding. And so from our funding, we pay for all of our budgeted expenses, the upkeep of schools, utilities, salaries, transportation, and we try to take care of a lot of expenses with housing children, in the sense it's not housing as far as where they live, it's housing them while they're at school. So the actual ADA loss from 2021 to 22-23 was about 1,200 students. And, we increase those numbers by working with the community and working with parents, saying, hey, get your kids to school so that they can learn, because they can only learn if they're, at school or in one of our home-based programs, of course. But without mitigation factors, just to kind of put that in perspective, it's about a $15 million, actually almost $16 million, $15.9 million loss to us whenever we've lost these amount of students that we stated from the 2021 school year to the 22-23 school year. Fortunately, there's been some mitigating factors from the state level with all of their statewide declining in enrollment that Dawn had mentioned earlier. It's not unique to our area that we're experiencing a decline in enrollment, but I think that we're probably a little more impacted on a micro level from some of this that we're talking about today with the short-term rentals. Some other points that I wanted to make was I made a few little bullets here on some of the comments that were made from folks that had preceded me here today. But staff housing displacement, we do experience that. Wayne did an excellent job of touching on, how families are affected and students are affected when they have to move from one school to the other or they have to move outside of the area. And we try to do certain things to soften that, but it also is, transportation is one of our biggest costs. Already for our budget, for a year for fuel is very expensive. So if we have to supplement transferring students so that they're not disrupted in the learning environment, then it drives up our cost, of which I just illustrated we don't necessarily have because of our reduction in ADA. And so when you think about, we had a previous mention of the delusion of our communities. It diminishes the voice of that area around those schools. Some materials were sent to me in preparation for this that illustrated how many short-term rentals we have just around Joshua Tree Elementary School. There's like 51 of these. And that's like half of probably everybody that goes to Joshua Tree Elementary School. Your tax dollars spent roughly $20 million to build that school. And so it was built for a certain capacity. And so when we only have, when we have about half of what probably should occupy that school attending the school, it's an underutilization of what the facility was intended for and why it was built. And so trying to balance those needs, we try to balance out how many kids are going to what school. We can only mitigate that so much with redrawing of school boundaries and trying to repopulate the schools a little more evenly, but it doesn't make up for the shortfalls that we have at those places. Also, you have less, communities start with schools, and communities oftentimes are built around schools. It's a micro community right there. The brothers and sisters go to those schools, generations go to those schools ideally, and so whenever you have that reduction, you're really eating away at your communities. The parent involvement diminishes, and we don't want to say that people stop caring, but we don't want people to stop caring. And so I just want to emphasize that. The other thing that I will mention is that when we're looking at the macro perspective of how we build facilities for our schools, some parents may say, well, I don't want my kid going to school in a portable, or that maybe that looks, if you're transferring here from the military, maybe the school doesn't meet the same standard, maybe of the nicer area you came from, or maybe the more well-funded area that you came from. And so how we try to combat that is we try to make our school facilities nicer, but we need funding to do that. And so as many of you know, we recently, I say recently, pre-pandemic, worked with many of our community members, Dawn, city members, our base liaisons, and we were trying to pass bond initiatives. Well, people and community members vote on bond initiatives. When you take those people out of our communities or they're displaced, they don't get to have the same voice into how their schools look and the monies that we're able to spend on these school facilities, because school facilities are locally funded. And so that's a big impact. The other is that when we lean on the state to pay their share of funding school facilities, there's not as much eligibility. So each one of these students that come to our school represent a certain unit of eligibility. And so the state says, hey, we'll give you this much money based on your eligibility per this school. Well, if you remove half the students from that school because they're displaced, you're not going to get as much eligibility. So that $2 million that you could have been eligible to get from the state, might be $500,000. So your dollars don't go as far. So these are all real impacts that happen from a reduction in enrollment and particularly ADA in our schools. The main thing that we can do as a community is what we're doing today. And if you have children or people that have students in our school system, encourage them to come to school, encourage them to take advantage of everything that we have to offer. I'm pleased to be part of this community. I'm a 29 Palms High graduate. I'm a long-term community member here in the Morongo Basin. While I don't live in Yucca Valley, I live in 29 Palms. I love 29 Palms. I consider the basin at large my home. And it's just a beautiful place to live and work. And but having said that, I've seen the changes. I have the same story as the president of the college here, and also where I bought my starter home here in the Morongo Basin for what would be considered cheap by today's standards. We bought our second home here, what would be considered cheap by today's standards, and I get those same phone calls that many people get, sell us your house for $1 gazillion, It's like, well, I don't want to sell you my house for $1 gazillion. First of all, I like living here, and where am I going to go buy another house for $3 gazillion? And so having said that, I just want to say thank you to all of you, and we enjoy having relationships with all of our community members, and we hope that you feel the passion that we have the compassion we have for our students, and the passion we have for educating our students and housing them as well. And thank you very much for your time.
Again, the community, we're talking about that. So who in the Morongo Basin is struggling to find housing? We've found that, heard descriptions from our various presenters here talking about all these peoples: renters, starter home families, young adults, Marines, retirees, disabled, and the chronically homeless. And so what do these different types of housing look like here? And there is, starting from the idea of permanent and or transitional housing, subsidized housing. You can see there's a few apartments available here. But as you've seen from the statistics, not a tremendous number of them. So let's take a quick look here at what, once again, of our housing spectrum, if we can. Just sort of here's this, which we've seen before, and I think it's important here, and the reason we wanted to include this slide is to sort of talk about what types of housing are, services and subsidies are required for the housing, and everything below that line it requires services and subsidies, whereas housing above, it's affected by market and policies for all the other types of housing. So what are some of the current efforts that we're undertaking here to address our housing problems? And with that, I'd like to ask Astrid Johnson to come up and say a few words, if you would, please.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity. And I'd like to first begin to explain a little bit about ARCH and who we are and what we do. So Morongo Basin ARCH is a nonprofit, a 501c3, that was started in 2008, actually by Wayne Hamilton, who spoke earlier. And then I was involved in 2015. It was like kind of reimagined or restarted in 2017. ARCH receives most of our money from grants that we apply for from the county, such as HEAP and the HAP grants that are coming out. We've had HAP 1, HAP 2, HAP 3 is in the wings coming. This money is used for basically many services that we provide. We have 6 homes here in the area, and I know we had that chart up there. We provide shelter. I know there's another nonprofit here, I think Luckino's here, that has Molding Hearts. So we have emergency housing programs out here. We also have transitional homes, which are people can stay longer. In 29 Palms, we have a program for families with children, homeless families with children in the Joshua Tree area. And then our shelter home is in Yucca Valley. So we do housing, but like you saw, the bottom portion of that line, these are just temporary housing programs, basically. Then we do get money from the grants to do other things as well, and one of them is to try to keep people from becoming homeless. So we have funds that cover emergency, well, when somebody has a pay or quit, we can come in and pay their arrears, which we did. And we had that program that the state offered too, that was very beneficial. I think it was ERAP, but that ended. So we're back to helping people stay in their homes. The other thing that we do is called rapid rehousing. Rapid rehousing, we'll pay the deposit and the first month's rent. We do that too when we have the funds. So how does all of this impact us? Well, I work with Wayne, and Wayne handles a lot of the families, so he's always telling me, there's somebody who needs to move into a home or they need to stay in their home. So we work back and forth constantly together trying to get people housed or stay in their housing. And the problem I run into is that we are constantly seeing people that are calling in saying, I've lost my house. We heard the story now, how this happens, right? The owner decides to sell the rental. They're suddenly unhoused. They have low income. Generally, the people we work with are low income. They may be on SSI, SSDI. Sometimes they have spousal money from a loss of a spouse, so they have that. But they are usually on very limited income. Some of them may have problems with the evictions, like Wayne explained, or they simply, because they've been homeless for a while, their credit score drops. So that's another factor that goes in there. I know Wayne mentioned about the credit scores. There's so many things that play into this whole thing. And one of them is that when they have a hard, fast rule, they have to have a certain credit score. If you are on the streets for a while and you're not doing reoccurring payments, maybe you had a problem trying to hang on to your property and then you lost it anyhow, suddenly that credit score is in the 50, maybe the 500s, and then you're not going to qualify. If they unfortunately have the eviction, trying to hang on to a place to live with their family, then they've got that to deal with as well. Then the whole cost of trying to get into the new rental it just becomes really, really difficult. So then if they move into the motels, staying in a motel is about $3,000 a month. That's Motel 6, any of the motels that we work with, it's $3,000 or more. So you can imagine if somebody is struggling along just on minimum, maybe either a fixed income, or maybe they're all working, but they still can't come up with the $3,000. I mean, if they're trying to move into the next place, there's nothing left. There's no money left to work with. So those are the people that we are constantly trying to figure out how we can possibly help them. So that's why I'm excited to be here today, because I'm hoping that we're going to come up with some really good solutions of how we can help these people stay somewhere safe while they're trying to get to that next step. I'm going to be involved with the point in time count, like a lot of you I think are, and we are going to go out and especially the outlying areas, because we know quite a few people, if they're not in the motels, they're in their cars, they're parked outside the city so they don't get run off, or they're in an RV somewhere out there, or they're living in a tent somewhere out there with their family, and those are the ones we're going to try to capture. It's important for us to have a good point in time count, because the grants that we receive, okay, so we give grants. We have a certain amount of base amount of money, but the rest of the grant amount is based off of the point in time count percentage. So it comes back to help our community with funding, to do a really good point in time count. and to make a good effort to try to locate as many people as we can so they're counted. Did I address your issues? Okay. Okay, thank you so much.
Well, the point here is that it is a complicated and complex problem. There are multiple agencies and groups that are addressing the housing needs, and you can see these listed here. And they, in turn, are Valley Starte is for transitional assisting youth, and they, in turn, are all part of and associated with the East Valley Regional Steering Committee, which is a committee that has governmental connections and can focus resources to help to distribute these resources. It's kind of a, before I started to become aware of the housing, before I started to focus on it, it was really, I was not personally aware of this East Valley Regional Steering Committee. Through our board member, Janet Johnston, has really helped a lot in terms of making us aware of this. So this committee was put together by the county as part of the forming a homeless strategic plan. So it's really, and the idea is to address homelessness on a county level. Well, with that, we're seeing what sort of paths to solutions we might be able to have at this point. And this is an important statistic here that we've become aware of through HUD, that it costs $40,000 a year to manage an unhoused person, versus society for much less, 2.5 times less, can do it for $12,000 a year. So that's why we know it's better to house people than have them homeless. And so with that, we're looking at what are some of the some of the issues that affect us here directly. It's in our basin, as we've heard, it's a relatively new phenomenon. We've heard people saying they would be able to purchase a house here not too long ago. The scale of the whole problem is surmountable. I mean, the Morongo Basin is a rather distinct community and geographic area. It isn't as if it's sort of part of an amorphous large city. The Morongo Basin is a rather distinct area, which I think helps to provide focus on it. And as we've seen here today, and we talked about this sense of community, the rural atmosphere and the intact natural environment is a real upside to housing here. And we do see that some solutions are being implemented in our incorporated areas. And with that, I'd like to ask Frank Luckino to come up and give us a little bit of his overview of what's happening in the city of 29 Palms.
Well, thank you and good morning. I guess maybe good morning, good afternoon almost. It was funny talking to Curtis and Don this morning about their presentations and their PowerPoints. Unfortunately, here's my hillbilly presentation, so it'll be more verbal than visual. And to validate something that Supervisor Rao said this morning about the granny panties. So early on in the development of the Yucca Valley Senior Facility, which is right on the highway, there was a discussion about all of us love to see our U.S. flags flying, our state of California flags, town of Yucca Valley flags flying. I said the time I see somebody's underwear kind of flying on those balconies, I was going to give her a call. But the problem, as we heard earlier, and I kind of took some notes to kind of elaborate on some of these. The problem that we are encountering now is all David Smith's fault, the national park. the great work that he has done, and we're going to miss David, has made our area very attractive. I remember, similar to Dr. Otten and his story, I moved here in 2003. And I think, I was starting to look for a house in 2005, which we heard from Peter Spurr that was one of those run-ups, that the crash happened in 2009, but that run-up, 2005, 6, it was difficult, very difficult at that time, finding a house. And I know my wife and I, we saw a house, hurry up and made an offer on it and overspent, lost probably half our value in 2009. So my point being, as we see from a government perspective, and we're the land use authority, economies ebb and flow, right? And, that's just a snapshot of 20 years. We're seeing that ebb and flow of now to then, and I'm sure it'll happen again. So just a couple things that, as that land use authority, a lot of folks look at us and, how are we going to solve the issues that are out there? Just a couple things from a policy perspective we're looking at. We could control the supply and demand. We can, from a policy perspective, look to build inventory. And, inventory is something that we're trying to look at. Right behind City Hall in 29 Palms, we're working on a facility, 100-unit affordable housing facility. Our developer, Milestone Housing, an emerging developer in California, they are doing a market analysis right now, and that market analysis kind of dictates to them. Because as mentioned earlier, and I'm going to kind of fold some of these things into my presentation, it's not like from a city perspective or even from a developer perspective that they want to not solve these problems as it relates to housing. It's penciling it. You'll hear this all the time. How do you pencil it? And so part of the market analysis that Milestone is going to be doing is going to look at it from a three-pronged perspective: is senior housing, from family, and this is all affordable housing, and veteran housing. So those are the three components that we're looking at. Not sure what the division is between the three elements, but that market analysis will be able to help them to determine, what the need is from a local perspective. Astrid, was great seeing Astrid here and speaking right before my talk. It's great working with Astrid and Morongo Basin Arts. The council, city council in 29 Palms is very supportive of Arch. Astrid does a great job. Anytime we have an issue, we call Astrid to see if there is a potential way to solve it. And even from a resource perspective, we have contributed, again, from a policy side, probably, I don't know, in the neighborhood of probably $25,000 to $50,000 over the past year to kind of help support the issues, because we identify their issues. We know there are issues and trying to work through that policy to fix them. Also, working with Morongo Basin Arts through Home Key program, through HUD, we purchased a property, a fourplex, maybe a fiveplex, hopefully, on Elm Street in 29 Palms for affordable housing. And that's 30% of AMI, area medium income, that we're working through the process right now because we can't displace people. As we heard a lot of issues from the private marketplace, you buy something, then you evict somebody, and on your way. From a government perspective, we can't do that, right? So we're working through that displacement process to find housing, so it can be for what its intended purpose is very low income, 30% of AMI. The other thing that we've been working through, it's on the lines. It's not deed-restricted affordable housing, but it serves as affordable housing, is our hotel conversions. That's, soup du jour, if you will, in the affordable housing perspective, because these are old facilities in a lot of cases, hotels that have outserved their need, maybe in the marketplace that they used to serve. So maybe they could be a rental property. So now we're seeing in 29 Palms 2 properties that have converted. Sunnyvale Garden and Suites converted, and that's 23 units from a hotel to a rental. Then 9 Palms Inn also, and that's only 8 units, is converted from a hotel to a rental. And I know it was mentioned earlier, a couple things about, forget who, I think maybe David or someone, talking about, maybe it was Peter, talking about the amount of hotel units that we have. Actually, I think it was in Supervisor Rao's. And 29 Palms has the most units as it relates to hotels, 625-ish, 40-ish. And right now, we're going to be, in the next year or so, Hilton will be coming to 29 Palms. They'll be adding another 100 units. That same group that is bringing in the Hilton Home 2 Suites, which is an extended care facility, extended suites facility, could be care, is coming in the next year or so. And that same group that's doing the Hilton also bought the Fairfield Inn, is going to be adding 25 units to that. Again, on the extended stay perspective, going to be Fairfield Inn, but I think it's, oh gosh, what is the Hilton or the Marriott extended stay brand? Anyway, it's going to be a dual brand, so we're going to be adding more units. So hopefully we'll alleviate those needs for those short-term rentals. Policy-wise, the city council, 29 Palms, is also Yucca Valley has done, is put a limit, a cap, a hard cap on short-term rentals. We're at that. We're just about at that limit right now. We're at, last week, I think, 460 units, permits that we have issued, and 500 is the cap. So 40 more, and we'll be at that cap. But again, as the economy kind of changes, we keep a close contact with some of our realtors. They're seeing a shift. So some of these short-term rentals, again, economies ebb and flow, are converting, back to long-term rentals. We haven't seen it in our numbers yet. How our operations will work is 4 quarters without TOT. Unless you surrender your license, you'll lose your license. So over the next year or so, I'm sure we're going to see 4 quarters of no TOT submissions. And so with that, they probably will have gone over to the other side, which is the long-term rentals. BAH, again, another thing that kind of popped up, and it kind of speaks to this cost issue, because really we as Californians have, from a supply perspective, have caused our own problems, with the cost of development. Everybody in this room, I think, from a perspective of we need more inventory. But the developer, just the reality of things, it has to make money. They're not going to do it just to not make money, even from the affordable side. The affordable developer isn't going to build it and lose money. So BAH, as this chart showed, it was very low. Supervisor Rowe remembers those conversations in this room, and many times with Paul Cook and some developers yelling at that time, Paul Cook, about the BAH. And we as developers, we can't build new housing at such low rates as BAH, right? If you have, if you leverage that $800, let's say, in rent, in a fourplex or whatever it may be, it doesn't pencil to build it, right? And fast forward, we increase, gosh, what was the increase? 40, 50% increases, and we're still not seeing any new units being built. So we're outpacing ourselves on cost of construction versus the rent that people, Marines in that case, can pay. Oh, I see a little time unit that's telling me I got to wrap up here. So one final thing, I think, and before I wrap up is, we are mandated, and we don't build units, from the state of California called, RHNA. RHNA is Regional Housing Needs Assessment, RHNA. And just so you're aware, from 29 Palms' perspective, we have to build 100 units over a 10-year horizon. We average about 10 units a year. So do the math, right? How are you supposed to get to 1,000 units? Which is a problem, again, back to penciling these projects. We had a banner year this past year, and it was 31 units we built last year. 30 new housing units we built last year. That's it. So banner year. But it's not going to hit that level of RHNA numbers that we're supposed to. So thank you, everybody, for having me here today.
Thank you so much, Frank. And now I'd like to hear from Curtis Yakimow about how Yucca Valley is doing in satisfying their housing needs.
Morning. Thank you, Steve, for the invite. We appreciate it. Good to see everybody here today. This is a really interesting group. It's a wide variety across the basin, so we appreciate everybody taking the time to come out and listen this morning. I'm going to have the luxury of just talking about Yucca Valley, and I think I might be either the last person or the second to last person holding you between lunch, and so I'm going to try and make this pretty quick, but I'm going to buzz through a couple of slides. Let's go ahead on to the next one. I'll give you a quick housing facts about Yucca Valley. Again, this is specific to Yucca Valley. If you can't see this, the real takeaway here is that our population growth in the last 10 years is flat, less than 1%. So when we think about how does that impact housing needs and housing inventory, is it because we have a whole group of people moving into Yucca Valley causing an increase in demand for housing? No, that's not the case. It's not population. I think that was supported by Mr. Daniels and his information on population trends in Morongo Unified. So that's not what's occurring. As Frank said, maybe it's Dave and his park causing that generation of visitation, which I think, quite frankly, is a terrific thing for this basin, because absent that, this basin would likely kind of die on the vine. And so we don't have a ton of manufacturing. We don't have a ton of high tech, although some of that's changing with the ability of people to work remotely now. We don't have great access to rail, to airports, things that you would typically see in a manufacturing environment or high-tech environment. And so what is it that the basin can leverage? And we think often that now is our tourism industry. It's environmentally, it can be done, if it's done right, it can be done in an environmentally sensitive way. It can be done to make resources available for our local community, jobs, employment, et cetera. So let's move on. These are for Yucca Valley. We have just about 10,000 various types of housing units. In our housing growth projections between now and 2046, we're identifying about a growth of 2,000 homes. That means that we would need to be building about 100 homes a year. As Frank indicated, our basin area does not have significant housing development of any type right now. The only type of housing that we do have is typically infill, single-family residential. Yucca Valley has no interest right now from outside markets on tract development, and very, very little interest, interestingly, on multifamily, which I think would be very beneficial to address some of the needs that we're talking about today. So 100 homes, we're right now somewhere bouncing around between 40 and 60 annually, and all of those almost exclusively are infill single-family residential. Let's move on. This is an interesting, and this will play into some of the conversation on short-term vacation rental, but the vast majority of homes that we have in Yucca Valley are approaching 30 years or over. And so that is very interesting when you think about how are those homes being made available either to current residents, to current renters, or to future ones coming in, whether they're new to the basin for occupation or coming to support the base operations. Moving on. Assisted units. In Yucca Valley, what do we have for basically affordable housing, formal affordable housing? We have about 165 different units. A good portion of them are across the way, and we'll highlight that in a few minutes. But we also have some over off of Mohawk, affectionately called as Mohawk, Sunny Slope Apartments, Yucca Valley Oasis. Moving on. This is an interesting slide I threw in here. This talks about vacancy rates and identifies that at any time, typically we have about a 10% vacancy rate, and whether that's homes listed for sale, whether they're seasonal homes, whether they're homes in transition, of our housing stock, of our 10,000 homes, about anywhere from 800 to 1,000 are vacant at any time. All right, let's move on. Let me talk a little bit about short-term vacation rentals. I know that's of interest to you. Our regulations were formally adopted by our town council in effective 2018. Our current inventory of permitted vacation rentals is about 725. Most of that all occurred in the last 3 years. We have very, very few prior to that. And some of that's a pandemic shift. As you know, people came out into this area in droves. Because of that change, the council decided that they wanted to ensure that they listened to the community, understood some of the negatives that were associated with short-term vacation rentals, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But we amended our ordinance in 2022, made a couple of changes to that. Probably the most significant policy change is a limitation on total permits. 10% of our housing stock can be used for vacation rentals. On our current inventory amount of eligible properties, that is about 775. So we are at 725 right now, and we are starting to see significant changes in the amount of interest from individuals wanting to establish a short-term vacation rental. I think that goes to the demographics in the real estate market that were shared with you earlier today. We're seeing much less applications coming in on a regular basis. And then even in our renewal rates of those that have been operating, we're starting to see some of those return back to the long-term rental market, and we're starting to see some of those hit the market for sale. People are not generating the numbers that they thought they might or that they were a couple of years ago. It's interesting when we look at the aggregate total of revenues that we're receiving on the TOT level, actually that's staying relatively constant, but we think that's spread out. There's many more slices of the pie, and so for each individual owner of an STVR, those dynamics are changing a little bit. Let's move on to the next one. This is just a map. It's the same map that's up here on the side, so you can look at that. The takeaway there is that there is not a concentration in Yucca Valley. They are everywhere. What we have begun to see in terms of trends is that for utilization, while a number of individuals came and bought properties throughout the town, the ones that seem to be doing the best are your higher end properties, the ones that are well kept, well advertised, and are providing a unique experience. The ones that are struggling quite a bit more are the ones in the general neighborhoods that are the day-to-day neighborhoods don't seem to be doing quite as well. So we would expect some of those to turn back into long-term rentals or open market inventory. On the next slide, let's talk about positives from our experience in Yucca Valley for short-term vacation rentals. There's quite a few of them when you think about it. Rehabilitation of dated properties. I showed you that other slide about all of our inventory is aging. The short-term vacation rentals, people came in and bought these. They cleaned them up. They cleaned up the blight in the front yard, backyard. They rehabilitated the homes. Ultimately, what happens when those homes come back to the market, I think is a good thing, whether it's for long-term renters, whether it's for some new family coming in and buying it. They're not buying a home that's going to need significant improvement that's already been done. So we think that's a terrific positive. Whole list of them there. We've heard of many stories from individuals that had lived in Yucca Valley for a long time. We're looking for an opportunity to move. Some of our seniors wanted to move next to their kids or closer to their kids. They were able to do that by selling their properties as the values increase. So some of those were the positive aspects. I listed the rest of them. On the next slide, I identify what are our challenges, and clearly visitation increase in Yucca Valley. As you go through town today, you're wondering where are all these people if our population is the same, where are they coming from? That demand was identified as a challenge for us. And demand on public services, pressure on housing availability, long-term market, things that we're talking about today. Let's move on. One of the things that the town of Yucca Valley did was in 2022, we asked our voters, are you interested in adjusting our transit occupancy tax rate to be able to provide some additional resources for you as residents? 72% said yes, we want to see that adjustment, so we've adjusted our TOT rate from 7% to 12%. And those funds are identified by the council for priorities associated with public safety and infrastructure, tourism industry, and affordable housing support. What ultimately that looks like in programming, we're still developing, but those resources will start flowing in over the next couple of years. Frank identified this for the city of Twentynine Palms. For this town of Yucca Valley, our numbers that in the next 9-year cycle is, or 7-year cycle is identified at 750 homes. And then those are broken down by the categories of income of what types of homes. So for example, our very low income target is to help support the creation of 155 new homes for the very low income category. For the low, 117, and then above moderate or market rate, 333 new homes. So the takeaway there is that We have a need for all categories of homes, not just affordable homes, but also market rate. And when you have market rate development that's done correctly, it can also help alleviate some of those demands overall for the various folks that are coming in the community. I want to spend just a few minutes on kind of bringing this down to what is the town doing? What is our policymakers doing? What direction are they giving? How are we helping this, this issue of housing? I think number one, it's just recognizing the impact of the market. And what do I mean by that is that if you've been around, you've seen cycles. It's kind of funny, I think one of the speakers this morning identified what occurred in 2000, Frank, you talked about it, what occurred in 2010, 2009 during the last housing boom. We had people coming to the town asking, hey, town, what can you do to help lift up housing prices? They've crashed. I've lost money. I'm upside down. And here we are being asked to help do what we can to make the community an attractive community to raise housing value. So these are typical cycles that we've gone in. In the last 2 years is no different. We've seen that cycle go up. I think what surprised all of us is how fast it went up in terms of housing price, housing demand. A lot of that, quite frankly, from our perspective at the town, has nothing to do with the town. These are macroeconomic environments. These are low interest rates. These are funds that are being generated and provided in response to the pandemic that gave people opportunities that they may never have had otherwise. And so many of those factors are at play. But there are certain things that the town does control and that we have the ability to address. Number one, regulatory barriers. We want to remove regulatory barriers. What does that mean? That means that for the town of Yucca Valley, our council wants to ensure that our general plan, which is built through community input, is up to date, is compliant with state law, that our development code is the same, that we've made changes. And in fact, one of the things that the town is required to do is every 7 years we provide what's called our housing element to the state housing and community development. They review it. They say, what can you be doing better to make housing affordable and to make housing accessible in your community? We were one of the first communities to have that last cycle approved in early 2022, so very, very grateful for that. Another barrier that we can help address through our actions is environmental. And the two primary issues that we have with environmental currently, specifically for the town of Yucca Valley, is always our California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, and then the second is California Endangered Species Act. On the CEQA side, what we can do is ensure that our planning documents, general plan development code, are consistent and defensible for developers that want to come in and develop here in this community, that we can help by ensuring that our policies are correct. On the environmental side, for California Endangered Species Act, specifically for the town of Yucca Valley, the single most challenge right now that developers have is dealing with the Western Joshua Tree listing as a endangered species. We have folks coming every day asking, is there clear guidance on what is the current regulation with the Western Joshua Tree? Sure. Right now, it's basically an endangered species. You can't do anything without an incidental take permit. We can't give that to you. That has to come from the Department of Fish and Wildlife. What does that take for an infill development? Well, they have to go get an incidental take permit. That's about a $50,000 to $100,000 process. So, are they going to develop right now in Yucca Valley? No. The answer is quite frankly no. So what we're trying to encourage is we, as the town council has clearly identified that our environment in this area is what makes Morongo Basin special. They understand that. At the same time, what we're looking to try and advocate for is reasonableness in what the application of those laws are. So as an example, in Yucca Valley, as I indicated earlier, the primary type of development that we have is infill. And if you have, for example, in the California Endangered Species Act, an endangered species, and the regulation is so broad that it doesn't provide for an ability to develop already disturbed land, how does that help us in our ability to try and provide housing alternatives for this community? So we will always advocate for reasonable application of environmental regulations and try and make it as practical and possible for responsible development in the town of Yucca Valley. And we recognize that having disturbed land is much different than having undisturbed land. And so we want to incentivize that development versus people coming in and buying new tracts of land that are undisturbed. Lastly, on the political side, how do we remove barriers from the political side? When we have a development that may be proposed or asked to be considered in the town of Yucca Valley, if it's next to somebody else, they may not want it. They say, well, we like affordable housing, but I don't know that I want it right here next to me. And those are things that we can help with, identifying what are the values of that and how do we make this attractive and understood in the community that it's a general benefit. Let me close with just one picture. Let's skip on this. This is just our site inventory map of the different places that we have. But this one was mentioned a couple of times by Honorable Chairman Rowe, as well as Frank was on the council at the time that this was entitled. This is our Dumosa Senior Village right out here on the other side of the highway. Couple of facts about this. Again, when this was being considered, a lot of folks in the community didn't want it. They said it was going to be too big. It's 3 stories on the highway. It's going to be a blight in the middle of town. Quite frankly, the insight that the town council had at that time was terrific, and they made it happen. This is providing 74 units of affordable housing. In 2012, when the project was done, it was $18 million. So if you divide that by the number of units available, it's about $250,000 per unit that costed to construct that and make that available. It's not necessarily just the cost of construction, it's the ability for it to be deed restricted for low income for 55 years. And that's really built into the financing structure and why these are so high. Just as an aside, I read an article in the LA Times that Los Angeles County's current per door cost for affordable housing is approaching $750,000. Unbelievable. But that's the reality that we're dealing with. So for the residents of Yucca Valley in this project, we participated as a lender of $3 million. So the residents have committed $3 million to make that project happen. And those types of investments are going to be required. The good news is it's provided, again, 74 units. It's full all of the time. And then the rents, depending on your income level and the number of units they have, can range anywhere from $350 a month up to market rate of about $650 to $750. So town will continue to work. Town council has given us guidance at a staff level to ensure that we continue to identify areas that the town can help in soliciting market interest in what we can do in Yucca Valley to address the housing issue, not only for market rate housing, but also for affordable housing. With that, I'll let you get to lunch. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Curtis. Excellent presentation. I was particularly interested in the studies that the town is taking to allocate exactly where revenue from TOT is going. And I think that is that's something that looking forward to see just the whole discussion about that and what decisions are ending up being made. But with that, it's lunchtime. We had hoped to be able. What this morning is proving is that this talking housing is very complicated, and it's every time during the course of our preparing today's program, we found that you just start getting into it, and before you know it, you're just delving into so many topics, and it gets so complicated. And here we are beyond the time limit that we thought, which is a reflection of that. So after lunch, we'll then present some of our suggested paths forward, and then be able to take a few comments as well. But thanks. Enjoy some food, please. All right. Well, let's let's continue with our, I'd like to continue now with our presentation. We're going to now see if we can't describe some of the a solution that we have that to be able to address some of our housing problems and housing issues. So I'm starting with the San Bernardino County-wide vision. It's up to us. You remember we mentioned that early in the presentation earlier. So there's a series of things. We support the creation of urban environments and protection of rural lifestyles to design senses of place that reflect local community values and history. We should encourage a complete price range of housing from affordable to luxury and the improvement of livability and energy efficiency through smart planning, design, and technology. We should address needs of special populations, including homeless, seniors, and veterans. When planning for growth in our communities, we should seek a better balance of jobs and housing within the county. And we should protect against blight within our communities that might occur when existing housing remains vacant for extended periods or is purchased as rental investment property. Here is this next flow chart here. The San Bernardino County is, as with other jurisdictions, required to create and incorporate a county-wide plan. Many jurisdictions refer to it as a general plan, and to control a community's long-term vision for the future. And within the general plan is required to have what's called a housing element that contains an analysis of existing and projected housing needs throughout within the county. The housing element was presented to the state, and it went through several elements. You heard that the town of Yucca Valley was very quick and very good in their getting their housing element approved by the state. The county took a little bit longer, and one of the reasons for that was that the state felt that the county did not adequately address the impact of short-term rentals on the housing supply. And the county has come back and made a commitment to implement what is called a particular program, series of studies for the basis of performing that analysis of the effect of STRs. So program 4 is this housing study. It's only referred to program 4 because it was a series of I think 12 or 15 programs that the county was asked to prepare. This is the actual, you can see it here, and the program 4, you can read here, because of the short-term rentals, particularly in tourism areas, it creates an issue where lower income residents and employees, as we've heard here today, lack access to affordable dwelling. So as such, they are required to conduct a public planning process. And we're really envisioning today's meeting as a part of this public planning project. Sort of the first public planning process is sort of the first step towards satisfying that. The county then, at the time that they prepared this, their last housing elements, they put in a timeline saying, this is where, these are the time frames we're going to meet. And as you can see, things are running a little bit late, kind of. We're talking about housing, and that seems to be the mode on these things. It always takes more than we think. So the idea is they're going to conduct a study, identify strategy, public engagement, this is kind of part of it, study and identify strategies, and begin implementation of strategies at the end of 24. So the thought here that this would be the implementation of a cap. So we are proposing that as part of this public planning process, that a program for advisory committee, for lack of any better nomenclature, that seemed a good way to go, be formed that would provide the kind of public discourse and dialogue on this. They would include planners, marines, service providers, realtors, lenders, the school district, Copper Mountain College, local groups and churches, law enforcement and government, and whoever's here today. It's to make it rather broad. It is a committee. This a committee regarding short-term rentals was formed and utilized within the city of 29 Palms, which they use that in terms of their analysis and creation of their ultimate cap. So with this, we're looking at this. At this program for is really an opportunity. It's a way to create the community we have been talking about, which I think is so important. Yeah. And then there are examples of other jurisdictions that have created vehicles for addressing and providing affordable housing. Through the structure known as community land trusts. There's one in Point Reyes that I noticed recently. We have some friends up there, and they're reworking an old Coast Guard station into housing. So they're using that land trust for that purpose. Habitat for Humanity is this kind of a deal. Habitat for Humanity, which is the largest home builder in the country, which is pretty amazing. So the thought is to then, and this is all led up to, or sort of coincidentally and serendipitously, there was a white paper prepared for the county about the possibility of forming a San Bernardino County Housing Trust. This white paper was published in January of 2022. Here we are a year later, and we're really hoping to see that get going. Here is a mini presentation by regarding the process for forming a housing trust by Monique Reza-Arellano. She's a public policy and governments relation individual at the San Bernardino County Transportation Authority, which would be the agency under which the San Bernardino County Land Trust or Regional Housing Trust would be formed. So if you can play that. Yeah.
So what is a housing trust? Essentially, it's a tool to bring outside dollars to this region to build affordable housing, as well as and implement other programs that fall under the big umbrella of housing. So the benefits of the trust that we've identified is it's a flexible source of gap financing for these affordable housing projects. We have the ability to compete for state funds that are otherwise off the table because no trust exists in this region. It's really a targeted solution for regional issues. We've done a lot of outreach with individual agencies, and they've identified priorities within their jurisdictions that we can then kind of create solutions for. So it's really able to focus on what it is that the problem is in our region. And the ability to pull resources, so all of us working together, we can bring in additional dollars from the state and federal governments. The trust vision and goals that we've identified, it's really just attracting that funding that we wouldn't otherwise have access to and to build affordable housing in this area. So we are looking at different ways, potentially increasing and preserving affordable housing supply. So if there's existing buildings that can be rehabbed, those would be projects that would be eligible under the trust, as well as providing financial relief for vulnerable and cost-burdened households, and then protect against displacement and poor housing conditions. So these are the overarching goals of the trust. These are the programming priorities for the trust that we've identified based on the outreach that we did with our local agencies. So definitely new construction of affordable housing, preservation and rehabilitation. We're looking at community land trust, workforce housing development, pre-development loans, down payment assistance, and financing for the purchase of land. Just to be very transparent and clear, these are the priorities identified. We would be subject to the prescription of whatever fund sources we're able to gain. So if we're looking at getting state dollars or federal dollars, obviously we'd have to follow the eligibility criteria. What would give us a lot more discretion on how these funds are built so that we can actually do a lot of these things like workforce and down payment assistance is those private donation dollars that would give us a little bit more flexibility in how we use those dollars. So how it works is essentially, currently we're building the trust. We're kind of identifying who the member agencies are going to be through our Council of Governments, County Transportation Authority. And then once we have that JPA in place, we're going to fund the trust. We need to find these state, federal, private donations, and any other funding sources that we can. And then we can allocate those to the projects, whether they're rural, suburban, and urbanized, with equity being the main, the main criteria in the mind of how we move forward.
So with this housing trust, the thought is we'd utilize it on, and there are many existing opportunities here in the basin, as we've talked about earlier. For instance, here's an abandoned senior center in Joshua Tree. This is a similar kind of situation to what I was saying was happening up in Point Reyes. So that might possibly be converted into affordable housing. If there are unused multifamily and hotel / care homes, already disturbed sites. One thing we really want to stress here in this meeting is that we don't need to scrape the desert. We want to keep the desert intact, and there are enough opportunities here that we don't need to sacrifice pristine land for this purpose. Now, then, we are then looking at, as I said, we've looked at this program 4 as really being kind of an opportunity for us here. The thought is to take, utilizing this program 4 advisory committee to be able to form the foundation or the seed from which a additional program, a Morongo Basin Housing Action Committee. Now, these names are names we just sort of chose to as a way to describe what we're happening. But this would be a action committee that would provide some analyses of working under the aegis or in partnership with the San Bernardino County Regional Housing Trust. And then it would do a needs assessment, trying to find what types of housing is needed, the appropriate scale for the housing, and appropriate locations for the housing. Then with identifying those, the thought would then be to form to assist in the formation. It would not necessarily be a nonprofit, but assist in the formation of a nonprofit building foundation. And that in turn would be partnered with trying to keep everything as local as we can with Morongo Basin contractors would be the ideal question, or ideal solution here. And this nonprofit and contractors would build and remodel to a community scale in the appropriate place, serving the appropriate needs. Small homes, apartments, duplexes, tiny home communities, ADUs, granite units, perhaps some CMC student housing, something similar to what Daren Otten was speaking about a little bit earlier. The members, the thought was, gosh, wouldn't it be great if this could really be a homegrown solution here? So utilizing the school and educational facilities at Copper Mountain, the trade schools, the school district trades, And there would ultimately have to be, there'll need to be paid crew and staff within this building foundation, as well as then interested others looking at perhaps the way Habitat for Humanity works, with it being primarily a volunteer type organization. Then this is all, based on the idea, it's fits right in with the countywide vision. As we said from the start, we're going to deal with this climate crisis. We have to build a strong community. It's up to us, and this is a way to do it. As an architect, one of the things that I wanted to mention here is I think that this type of a foundation could really help the overall self-esteem of our community. There's nothing like building something to really make you feel like you're, getting your hands on something and building it. There's a need for those type of skills to be developed, and it seems like it would be something that would give people a sense of self-worth, a sense of purpose, and really fulfilling a need, something that would really make you feel good. And the fact that it would all be originated and done here in the Morongo Basin as the focus for it just seems like a real win-win kind of deal. So that's the basic idea we have, is let's pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, so to say, and really let's take on these problems and build some solutions. So with that, I'd like to see about opening up our mic and have people speak a little bit. I know that there's a list, and I know that Daniel Belew with Rescue Plus Rescue has Rescue Plus Residents, has some things he'd like to share with us. So I know Stacy's scrambling to pull up his PowerPoint, but so come on up, Daniel. Or if you'd like, I have a mic that we can pass around. Okay.
All right, so for presenting a solution, right? It's like an idea, like some place to get started from, so I appreciate that. Thank you, Steve. All right, cool. So we're just going to have the cover slide up there. I only get like 3 to 5 minutes to just introduce. I know we're going to cycle through, and then there'll be room for questions afterwards. So if after I'm done, anyone has any additional questions just specifically for me or any others who are going to follow me in their just introductions, we'll all be here for a little bit longer. So as you kind of said, my name is Daniel Belew. I am an active duty United States Marine stationed out at Twentynine Palms. I'm a Chief Warrant Officer 4, so when the Colonel presented his list of Marines all living in the area, it showed 3 Chief Warrant Officers living in Yucca Valley. I'm one of those 3 people who live out here, right? So it's not a whole lot of us, kind of the unique monster amongst the Marine Corps Marine Chief Warrant Officer. So I was homeless as a teenager, right? So I grew up living in an environment that was not safe and didn't enjoy being there, and as was talked about, being a couch surfing type of person in college maybe isn't always tracked. But it is definitely a state of homelessness. And so I have personal experience with this, and I understand it. And I started a podcast basically in 2020. I moved out to the base and started talking with another Marine who'd gotten out before about social problems and government structures. My degrees are all in political science and understanding how governments throughout history have changed and what those constructs mean. And that was what the podcasts were about. But what we talked about, it seemed like every single episode was how homelessness affected whatever topic we were talking about. So it was constantly on my mind. So by the end of 2021, we'd done the podcast for 2 years. We talked about it so often, and it was in my mind and in my heart, and I had basically decided I needed to do something instead of just continuing to talk about the problem. So have a concept, an idea for how I can present a unique solution to the problem, at least specifically for veteran homelessness. So if you're not aware, across the country, last point in time count, 65,000 veterans across the country homeless. Basically last time I was counting was done. California owning 11,000 of those, so leading the pack there. And in Southern California, the problem is the worst. Even though I know a lot of people talk about homelessness in San Francisco, in Southern California, at least among veterans, it is definitely the highest concentration. Los Angeles alone is more than 5,000 veterans homeless in just Los Angeles. To try to help solve that problem, the VA has a department inside each of all their different sections to deal with just veteran homelessness outreach. For Los Angeles, those 5,000 veterans are served by 5 people. So it's just unrealistic for them to be able to handle it on their own. So then it relies on nonprofit organizations to be able to come in and try to fill that gap. So one of the unique solutions, and this is kind of what we're trying to provide, is by being out here physically, but supporting all of Southern California, the idea is to do outreach, identify people who fit in with our program well and would meet the criteria for being able to have us help them to solve their problem, and then coming out to this area, living on site out here away from the problems and the situation that they have gotten themselves into, probably the people and the life that they're living who aren't really necessarily helping them get back on their feet to get a real fresh start. So our program, the kind of unique part of it is that what we're gonna do is they're gonna come, they're gonna live on site. We go all the way from outreach until they are placed in a job somewhere else in the country, anywhere in the country. So we're looking towards trade skills, jobs that are like marketable online where you can do that work from anywhere as well. So they go all the way from us finding them saying, yes, that's a solution is I would not mind getting out of here and going somewhere else. And then they're all the way through rehabilitation training, all being done while living on site out here in our location. While they're doing that, they're living in, and here's where the weird part comes up, they're living in what's a converted ambulance. So we get retired ambulances, that's why the picture's up there of an ambulance along in our logo. So we take these retired ambulances that also had lived a life of service, much like the veterans did, and we bring that back to life by turning it into a small home that they'll live in while they're living with us and going through their rehabilitation. They'll figure out the pieces and parts of the different layouts they like, the parts that they don't like. They come up with a design and then build that with us. So a big part of what Habitat for Humanity does that makes them very successful is they do what's called sweat equity, right? So as you work and build and work with Habitat for Humanity to build your own home or build someone else's home, you're earning credits towards your own home as you're in the program. You've put your own time and effort. And like you said, like when you build something with your own hands, you own it a lot more than if you just pay some money for it. So they'll be then designing and building the home that they're then going to move forward into that new life with. So they're going to take a converted ambulance that will be their home and that new skill and that new job and move on to some new stage in their life to try to get a real reset. So that's Rescue Residence, and it's as fast as I could possibly hopefully deliver it. Hopefully I haven't kept it under 5 minutes. I'm pretty good at talking fast, actually, when I'm teaching at the schoolhouse. I usually have to slow down, but I know that I was time crunched, so I went as fast as I could. So I apologize if you couldn't keep up. You mentioned that MCS, the schoolhouse, the Marine Corps Communication Electronics School on 29 Palms, is the largest schoolhouse after the recruit depots, right? So every single Marine goes to recruit depots. Largest schoolhouse next is Marine Corps Communication Electronics School, 29 Palms. I actually run the largest course there also, which puts 1,500 Marines through training to become radio operators for the Marine Corps. So I know about bringing Marines in, training them, and getting them through. So this is definitely not just the homeless piece for me understanding it, but also bringing people in and helping them find what it is that they want to do going forward. So appreciate your time. I'm going to go ahead and step away and let whoever is going next.
I want to put just a little more context into what we're doing here. We have had to be fluid. We had to kind of scramble our agenda a little bit, but we've gotten through it all, and all that wonderful information is terrific. But in the interest of time, we had planned to have nonprofits related to our issue here to give them some time to make presentations. We've got 9 people on the list. I'm not sure all of them represent particular organizations, but we also want to get to that question and answer. So I'm going to read the name, and if the person who would come up would really keep it, you don't have to talk quite as fast as Daniel probably, but if you can keep it to 2 or 3 minutes. The other thing I want to say is that everyone for whom we have an email that attended today will get a summary of the program that will include links for everything. You know, all these organizations, plus the government organizations that we've been referencing. And plus probably, knowing Janet, we'll have some handout type things, documents with more information. So the next person on the list is Derek Marshall, and it just says community organizer. So Derek, a couple of 3 minutes.
And I'm bringing my timer right here so that it's kept to exactly 2 minutes. So hey everyone, Derek Marshall. I ran for Congress this past. Oh, thank you. I ran for Congress this past cycle, so many of you may know me. It's unofficial. I will be running again, although that's not officially announced. But I'm here today to kind of talk a little bit about the way in which we view government, because I think it's really important. We're having one of those age-old moments in American history where we're having the conversation about the fight between big bad, government and big bad business. And I think that when we look at the solutions that we're going to need as we round the corner, is that we're going to need both. And in reality, if you take a look at the front room here, and if we take a look at the folks that are here, everyone in this room, we have business community, we have conservationists, we've got, I think, union members, I'm sure, in this room. And so when we look to something like housing, when we look to the solutions for what we're experiencing here in the high desert, what we're going to need to do and understand is that everybody is going to be a part of the solution. Now, what I want to talk a little bit about is drawing from my experience. I've been to over 50 countries. I've lived in 5 or 6 different societies. I speak 5 languages. And I want to draw a little bit upon my experience having lived in societies that have almost no homelessness. Because I think that one of the best things that we can do for ourselves when we say, hey, how are we going to solve an unhoused crisis? How are we going to solve for the fact that people are demanding to come and live in our community but don't have housing? Well, one of the best ways that we can do it is we can look at other societies and how they do it. And the way that they do it, and there's a common thread, whether you're talking about, the Japanese, the South Koreans, Singapore, Germany, Sweden, when we take a look at pretty much every single society, what we have and what they have in common, and what Steve was kind of talking about before, is they have a public option for housing, right? And what that means is they have an allotment of housing that is public. And this is where the second paradigm shift come in. A lot of time when we talk about social housing or when we talk about public housing, we think crime. We think, ooh, those poor people that are living there and there's going to be squalor and trash. The reality is that 1/3 of Vienna, one of the most beautiful cities on this earth, 1/3 of Paris, the most beautiful cities on this earth, is public housing. So how does it work? It works because it's multi-income. So what that means is that the people that are earning a 6-figure salary, they want to move into the public housing as much as the person that is unhoused. And so by having a public option for housing, and by opening up some allowance for a public option for housing, where different residential houses can be bought and stuff like that, it helps to adopt many, many birds with one bird bath, right? For example, if you're dealing with a short-term rental crisis, first of all, I 100% support capping. I think that we need to cap, in the short term. And also, I think that one of the ways that we can solve for our community and community demise is by ensuring that if you have, let's say, 10, 20% of a housing in a community that is public, that means that in any neighborhood, in any street, you can make sure that the housing is, that there's going to be a certain amount of housing that is not short-term rental because you have the public option available for it. I'm at 3 minutes and 30 seconds, so I'm going to wrap it up. But what I want to just kind of talk about, or what I wanted to sort of like begin to do is to say, like, look, there are other models. I think today when we were talking, when Steve brought up the public housing developer, like the concept of a public housing developer, heard some comments today about, $400,000 being an affordable housing unit. That's the market rate. The market rate right now for a housing unit, affordable or whatever, is about $400 per square feet. So if you're building a 1,000 square foot unit, it's going to cost you $400,000. What I will also say is that a large part of the cost, labor cost of these housing, about 50%, is coming from private health insurance. So if we were to pass a Medicare for All system, 50% of that would cost, so about 25% of a unit housing cost would come down when we start to think about bigger picture items and when we have a paradigm shift. I'm going to stop talking right now, but these are some of the things that I just wanted to add to the conversation. So thank you.
A lot of passionate people here today, which is a good omen, I think, for some progress. Cookie Billsborough?
I'm going to try. Okay, this had to go out the window almost, because y'all addressed a lot of the things that I have been jumping up and down about. But I am going to say some things, and Okay, on the Morongo Basin Valley, with the STRs in their habit.
You need to use the mic.
I'm sorry. With the STRs, here's what goes into my mind. Now that the county is doing something, it hasn't been, because people for years now have been talking about this, and I have 7 unanswered questions from last year. The county, when they had that meeting at 62 on Joshua Tree, none of the committee brought up housing and homelessness until 2 women brought it up. So people, the one thing I've seen throughout is that people feel the county ignores them, period, and doesn't want to hear what they have to say. So that's one of my ones. And I would like to, and I understand STRs are not considered commercial, yet the fella next to me gets $500 a night. That sounds pretty commercial to me. But apparently there's some kind of law going on in California that they're not. And it makes me want to, why is it that all this money has come in to our communities, and yet what do they contribute? And why have they not, whether it's coming from the county, if the county's making all this money, give it back to us for housing. And I'm not a believer in hands up. I think that if we're going to do something like that, the people that are going to be residents, they can contribute if they can help build. Be a part of it, because they also need to learn how to take care of it. And if you can't build because you have physical capability, physical problems, because I spoke to 2 or 3 homeless men last night, and one said, well, I can't do anything physically. I said, you can contribute in another way to the community. Give back. So that's my thoughts on that. In the meantime, okay, let's see, wait a minute, give me a second. Many citizens, I told you all that. I would like to say that one of you fellas brought up who did not attend this meeting. And things like, where are the corporations? Where are the people who have got these STRs to come and listen to our side and what you've impacted? What can you do to do your part? So these are just kind of the things that have crossed my mind, and I do have ideas about how we could do the villages, but that could be for another day. But I will say this, us coming together, we also, if we would have more meetings, but we also should have people bottom to top, top to bottom. Your churches, your businesses, the corporations, the homeless, they have stories to tell, which I'm going to be working on that next. So all I know is that this has been so great, because this is democracy in action. We may not get our way, but we're going to have our say, and we may together solve problems. And I loved what our gentleman just before me said. I believe in possibilities over probabilities, but it's going to take all of us, because empathy is our biggest enemy right now in our communities and in our whole nation. We got, even if you got 5 minutes, be a part of democracy and civics. That's my saying.
Passion is the word today. Tanya, I don't know if it's Hamidi or Hamidi. I've never known how to pronounce it.
It's Hamidi, but I respond to, hi. Yeah, my name is T. Hamidi, or Tanya. I just wanted to, I've lived in Joshua Tree for about 15 years, and I just wanted to introduce a project I'm doing as a way of maybe adding another layer so that you all that are doing projects can reach out to me this next year and in the next 3 years. I received a grant to do an LGBTQ high desert, basically queer oral and trans oral history project. And I really see this project as an oral history, a needs assessment. You know, I have a PhD in gay. I worked for the U.S. Forest Service for 6 years as a wildland firefighter. I guess what I mean is, you know, I go hard, you know, I do my study, and I try and give back. And here at the college, well, yeah, I can't get a job, you know, teaching what I teach, teaching what I know, right? It's just the community college, whatever, doesn't have the kind of classes that I teach. Same thing at the high school and elementary school level. So those aren't places where my skills are going to be useful here in the high desert. I don't know why I'm nervous. I'm not really nervous. It must be the sugar. I don't know. I had a couple cookies. So unfortunately, I'm kind of like my brain and my skills in building queer community, in educating around queer and trans, anti-violence, and legislation, and just all the things that I study and am passionate about, because queer and trans and gay folks take care of each other. We also yell at each other and we have opinions, but we've always known that maybe others weren't going to be there for us, and so we learn how to do lateral support. So this project is my way of giving back by really starting with a needs assessment. And it's just, storytelling. We're going to tell each other stories. How'd you get here? How'd you survive back before there was whatever there is today? What happened when your parents found out and you were kicked out and were living wherever on the Mesa or whatever it is, right? So I wanted to just make you aware of that and let you know that I'm going to be beginning this needs assessment work. And I think those of you doing nonprofit works can feel free to reach out to me. It's from youth to adults. And I do know that we have some youth support groups for queer and trans youth here in the high desert, in the Yucca, at the Tay Center, and I'm learning, some people have been hooking me up with things they need to look up. And I'm going to be working kind of like outside of the school systems in a community setting and starting to try and connect the dots. And I think that's what this meeting and what y'all are doing. And so I just wanted to just share back that, education is power, and when people can learn to empower themselves, it's not a pull yourself up by the bootstraps thing. It's definitely like you got to have help to make it, right? But as people also learn how to advocate for themselves, I'm not, y'all know this, right? But like, there's this lateral work that has to be done because we lead intersectional lives. We could be Christian and gay. We can be in the military and be trans. We can be super radical and not like trees. We can love trees and still be a capitalist. We're in a really complex society, and that word intersectional isn't just for the liberals. It's to solve problems, so that if 4 times as many queer youth, have the, might attempt to commit suicide, right, which is the going rate, the going statistic, right? 4 times queer youth will attempt suicide, and the statistics from the Trevor Project say every 45 seconds there might be a thought or an attempt, right? And then in the queer and trans youth population, just as a youth, we're not talking about elders, we're not talking about those of us in the middle, right? Other statistics. Of those, 4 times as many queer and trans of color, twice as much, right? So it's layers upon layers of intersectional pressures and hierarchies, and a lot of ways to address it is not only top-down, but lateral, because together, as we create this paradigm shift that we're talking about, where do you go? Oh yeah, over there in the back. But as we try and imagine it, there's going to be some conflict in our communities, right? Like, I want this, no, I don't want this. This is how we get money. That's what we do. So, but it's really about like actually learning to dialogue together, which I'm not trying to be utopian here. I just want to say this is how I'm going to do the work to try and figure out how to cross those gaps, because collaboration isn't easy, right? No matter how many chocolate chip cookies you have, it doesn't make it go away. So, so please, keep your eye out for me. Because this is a storytelling, but it's really a way to kind of do needs assessment across the board. So, thank you.
Three more, then we're into questions. James from Cross Country Mortgage.
I'll do a time or two so I don't go too long. I'm James Allenbach. I've been a loan officer in this community for about 15 years. I probably contributed to the STR problem that we're all facing now. We did about 330 short-term rental property purchases for about $150 million in an 18-month period up here. So a lot of money went. The permit thing cap, we absolutely needed. Giving back as far as the affordable housing portion goes, there's a tremendous amount of programs here in San Bernardino. San Bernardino Housing Authority has a program, they'll subsidize 40% of your mortgage payment for up to 15 years. people that qualify, USDA is here. There's a bunch of programs that the affordability is actually there as a payment. It really, it's not the house price, it's the payment. If you get a house for $500,000 but the payment's affordable, you'll do it. So there's a lot of programs coming that are gonna help benefit or put this forward for people to actually get into properties. And they're doing it in a medium income price range so that people who make $250,000 a year instantly don't get to take advantage of these things. It's for people that are inside of our medium income range. Also, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have stepped in. So if you want to buy a vacation house today and you want to put down 10%, they're going to hit you with 4% in fee. What does that mean to you? If you buy at $400,000, they're going to charge you $16,000 to own a vacation house just as a flat rate fee. So that has really slammed the brakes on how many people, because truth of the matter is 90% of these out here were bought as 10% down second homes for people from LA, Orange County, San Diego, Santa Barbara, and San Francisco. So that implementation for that rate cost, and not only that, it's a hard fee, and then your interest rate's going to be, if prime money for a primary residence 5%, your rate's going to be about 8.25%, on top of the $16,000 you're going to pay at $400,000. So it's all slowing down. The cap is necessary. I think we probably got a little bit too crazy with it, too fast, but there was just not a system in place to slow it down. And there was a gold rush. It was money hungry. I've had the opportunity to work with Facebook execs, Google execs, and they're having meetings at Google headquarters, and they're like, Joshua Tree, we're going to call you guys a Zoom town. Like, it used to be a boom town where they found gold. Now we call it a Zoom town because tech people want to come here and be here and live here and enjoy what we have. Well, when they come here from the Bay Area, $600,000 is a drop in the bucket. Everything there's $1 million. So for them, this is very, very affordable. And unfortunately, what happened is the nurse that works at High Desert Medical and the DOD employee on base contractor, they're making $110,000 a year. They can't compete at $590,000, especially when somebody's coming in with all cash. So we're doing our best as an industry, as a mortgage industry, to pull together affordable options to put people in primary residences, as well do our part is control the hyperinflation, the speed at which the housing goes up here. So that's what we're doing. There is like a light at the end of the tunnel, I guess, in this instance, and it's not a train, hopefully. But yeah, there are some protectionisms being put in place, and so hopefully this will all shake itself out. Market stability is really coming into play in the last 4 months. So, you were seeing like, oh, I want $600,000, and then they were selling at $495. So you're actually starting to see people come in with a realistic expectation. This is not 8 months ago. This is not last year. So a buyer can go in and actually, that primary residence buyer can go in and get a deal accepted and get put into a property because the mayhem is slowing down. So all I really had to say is that San Bernardino is doing what we can. The mortgage industry locally here in the Inland Empire is also doing what they can to keep housing affordable and put together programs to put people into homes.
We're really getting a lot of eclectic information and useful. Crystal Wysong from CMC.
It's going to be hard to believe that I teach because I'm going to be really nervous speaking in front of you, but and I'm formerly of CMC. I just retired, but I was teaching the culinary program, and it was so frustrating to have talented students who couldn't start a business. And so just by chance, I heard about this Assembly Bill 626, which is the Micro Enterprise Home Kitchen Operation. I don't know if any of you have heard of that. The state passed it in 2018. It became effective in 2019. The problem with the bill is that each county has to opt in or opt out. And just so you know, the acronym is MECO, so I'll be referring to MECO, and that's what I'm talking about. So we had 2 county supervisors who were in favor of opting in, and we just needed 1 more. And unfortunately, before we were able to convince another supervisor, one of the supervisors who was in favor retired. So we now have to convince another 2 supervisors to pass the bill. But basically what it does, I don't know if you've heard of the cottage industry. That allows people to make non-perishable food. And they can sell it out of their home, or they can sell it to resell. There's 2 different permits. MECO is an extension of that. It allows people to make perishable food. So, I mean, I have, for example, a student called me 8 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday in tears. I'm going to be in tears thinking about it. Looking for housing because her fiance had thrown her out. And, she said, I know you know about this stuff. Can you help me find a place? And this is someone really talented who, if she could have just afforded another place to live, and this bill was in effect in our county, she could have started cooking out of her house. So I have other stories like that too, but I won't share them with you right now. But it's, there's a lot of talent in this basin, and this would just enable people to start a business. Maybe eventually they'll get a brick and mortar place, but I have a whole lot to say, but I'll stop. Anyway, if you're interested, I do have handouts for...
And we'll send your document.
Yes, and I'm here because she suggested that I come. I didn't really connect it to the poverty issue, but it is, right. Well, right. Well, and that's the other thing. Even if you aren't homeless, there are so many families here. I had so many students with kids, and they want to start a restaurant, but they've got kids and they've got bills, and there's a need because of all the STRs. There's not enough food available. I get emails all the time. Can you cater this? Can you cater that? I don't cater anymore. So, yeah. Anyway, if you're interested, let me know. I'll give all of you a handout about it.
Good. Thank you. Yeah, that post-event email is going to be full of a lot of information, but we want to honor everyone who has been a part of this today that has information to provide. And Astrid Johnson has one final comment. Then we're going to go into question and answer, and I will talk about a little bit of ground rules for that.
I wanted to add something more to what I said this morning. And maybe also kind of give you motivation to really stop and think about where we're going. One of them is that there is grants coming up all the time, and I know when Frank had mentioned Project Home Key. There is going to be another round of Home Key this spring. So what Home Key is it's 2 parts. There's a nonprofit, and then there's an entity. There's specific entities that can do that, and maybe that trust is going to be that one, where they partner up and make funds available to actually either like take over a motel and convert it over, or maybe some other projects that we'll come up with. So think, depending on how fast we get going on these ideas, there will be money available to apply. There'll be an RFA coming out this spring. I would think maybe March or April, okay? The other thing I wanted you to think about, and I guess when we get into more like planning and we get groups together, is because I work with the homeless, and I know others have direct contact all the time too, the homeless are a variety of people, okay? There's a variety of reasons why they're homeless. Some people that we see commonly in the towns, like in Twentynine or Yucca or Joshua Tree, are going to be the chronic drug addicts who are not going to be easily housed because they don't want to give up their drugs. We can't force them to give up their drugs, right? So when we're doing something and we're using county money, there's a program called Housing First, which means that you can't use drugs or mental health as a barrier to prevent them from coming into housing. So we need to keep that in mind when we're planning a project. And, okay, so, I told you I have homes. So some of the homes are self-funded, and they're run as a sober living. So we completely bypass that issue. Others, though, are with county money, and so we do have to honor Housing First. So they can come in as addicts, And we can't force them into recovery, but we can maybe stipulate that you're not bringing your paraphernalia on here, and you need to make a huge effort to try to recover. So keep that in mind. So there's that group of people. Then there's often the people, though, that are recently homeless. We've been talking about them like maybe a senior that suddenly is homeless, and they're calling me saying, I don't know what to do, I'm scared. So those people would be a little bit easier to house if we have affordable housing, we had some kind of place to put them other than trying to stick them in a motel for over $3,000 a month, which becomes, we just don't, Arch doesn't have that kind of money. I'm going to tell you right now, we're either feast or famine on the grants. So when we're doing the planning, when we get to the planning stage and start really talking about it seriously, is to remember there's different people that we need to be targeting how we're going to house them. It's not going to be like, oh, I'm going to do this, and that's going to take care of everybody's problem. We're going to have to think of a variety of solutions for them. Like I was talking to some people earlier about even just getting land and having some kind of a place they could safely park. I'm sure all of you have seen the people parking all over the place in their RVs or in their cars or in their, right? Because they've run out of money and they can't live in a motel anymore by the end of the month. What I'd like to see, that might be an easy solution to start off with, is just simply finding a safe place for them to park. Having it controlled by 24-hour guards so nobody is causing any issues. It can park there at night and then they can leave, and it's safe. So that might be a simple thing to start off with before we get into maybe motel conversions or something like that. Those are just some ideas to start mulling over in your head, okay?
It seems, like Astrid said, there's all these levels of housing issues that we're talking about, and in her case, it's those levels of homelessness. But with all the issues that are here, and especially to honor the working people, who are government representatives who are still here, I'd like to organize the questions first toward them. Are there questions from the audience that are for our remaining, well, we've got the Marine base represented, and we have the school district represented. Were there any questions specifically for them so that we can let them go? This is an extra working day for them. I understand that. I've been there. Okay. We thank you so much. We don't mind if you get up and go, but we're very grateful that you were here. And for, yes. We, as I said, will be sending a lot of information out to everyone we have an email for. And today's, this question and answer, I guess I'm guessing that you would have hoped to have questions for some of the county or town or city folks who are no longer here. And we are open to your questions, but I think all of us have a bad STR story, right? And we don't kind of want to reiterate that. But if someone has a thought, a plan, okay, I see someone who hasn't spoken before back there, and we'll start with you. I think we can probably hear your question, and then I will do it up here so that we can record it.
Rent control, I don't know if that is being implemented in the region at all, but that's something to talk about and discuss. Restrictions on annual rent increases would be helpful for low income. Tax breaks for landlords who agree to rent restrictions. As a homeowner myself, I have a 0.47 acre lot, and there is room to put a house on my backyard, which I am in the middle of trying to do. My first thought 4 years ago was making it, an Airbnb, but I changed my mind. I am now trying to make it a residence for my 2 friends / coworkers, and I'm hoping maybe there could be a program with the city and the county allowing or having homeowners get incentives for building a second home on their property for long-term rental use and not the Airbnb version. Another idea I came across online is something called the employer payroll tax. This is done in France. The employers of the area will be paying a payroll tax that will go towards financing affordable housing in the area. We've got Home Depot, we've got Walmart, they've got the money. We spend our money there. It should come back to us for some affordable housing funds. Smaller businesses, smaller payroll tax. So just some of the ideas I had here. I have more, but I don't want to take up too much time.
Thank you, and I've made note of those, and we'll report those. Steve, in front of you here.
Thank you. Astrid, do you, yeah, there she is. Are you familiar with the huge encampment that is right behind the fire station, on the abandoned fire station on 247? It's right, I'm not sure if it's Flamingo Heights or it's Landers. I tend to think it's kind of Landers. And there's an enormous encampment there. Pardon me?
When we're going to do the point in time count next week, that's where we need to go.
Okay.
And we do need volunteers who know of these areas. What happened last year is, the reason it looked so nice, you know, when they put it up there, is that remember it happened last year in February. And the person, Wade Hamilton, was going to go around in January. He already had a plan. He was going to go around and cover all the county areas, but he wasn't able to do it because the whole month got changed and he wasn't available. So we missed out. Nobody counted Morongo, nobody counted Landers, Wonder. None of the outlying areas got counted. It was just the towns. And then when I talked to code enforcement, which is Chris and Vanessa in Twentynine, they keep saying, we only have 20 people we're counting. Because those are the ones that they see and everybody sees. Yucca Valley's got the same situation, I'm sure. They see the same people all the time. Those are probably the drug addicts, right? They're not going very far. But I have a friend who is feeding the homeless, and she gives a much higher number. And she goes to the outlying areas that come in at night when code enforcement quits. And so then I'm hearing from her 70 people she's feeding every night because we give her bread from the way station. She's making all these sandwiches and all this food, and she runs around every night for hours feeding people. And I trust Jen's, numbers that she's giving me. So that's why things, if you know of a place, please either let us know if you can't participate. You can, call me, call somebody, you can call Deborah. Deborah's involved in this. We need to know. We really do need to know. We are going to, Wayne is back in the saddle, thank God. He is going to go around and we're all checking constantly to make sure that we know where everybody is. Because we want to have a much better count than we had last year.
Let's have anyone who has specifics get to Astrid. And we really do need to start closing up.
I want to say something really, really quick, because Astrid says contact her. Really, when that email comes out to you, get a hold of these phone numbers, because she can't find none of these tent post people, right, can find everything. Get your information to them, even if you don't think they can use your information, because they might know the person who can do something with your information.
Right before the next speaker, let me just quickly read the auction item winners. Most people have taken them already, but I'm just going to read through quickly. The desk set number 1 is Aaron Gatlin. The Joshua Tree glass plate is Mary Ari. Cholla cactus photo, Daniel Belew. Framed watercolor, Mary Ari. Cloth bag, Arch McCullough. James Hammond's print, Aaron Adams, who left. Dragon watercolor, Mary Ari. Who card game, Mary Ari. Pillow by Louisa Bartlett, Bonnie Brady. Rose Cefalu photo of the alien was Glenn Harris. On the Rocks glasses, Aaron Gatlin. Glass pressed art by Kelly Whitmer was for Kate Collins. The Swiss Army knife vintage version, Arch McCullough. Framed art from Melissa Lakey is to Laura Hawther. Rain Barrel 1 to Jean Bixby. Rain Barrel 2 to Glenn Harris. the electrified gas lamp to Lindsay M., I couldn't read the last name, Louisa Bartlett quilt number 1 to Gretchen Grunt, and Louisa Bartlett quilt number 2 to Bonnie Brady. Thank you, everyone, for contributing to that. It's a great result. Steve? Go.
Is there some place, probably should go to Astrid, that we can notify people that maybe you should make sure that this area is being counted because we see them late at night or early in the morning? Okay. Yeah, but I'm saying an area you may not have known about. Yeah, who do we contact? You?
What's the number?
Okay, I think they're going to have my number in.
Yeah, in the email.
Everybody has it. It's either going to be me, you can call Wayne, you could call Deborah. Deborah's the person in charge. She works for the city of town of Yucca Valley.
And Astrid, I had a question for you. I noticed and Stacy, I wonder if we might pull up by any chance within Dawn's presentation, she had her slide about the homeless count. And I noticed in 2022, maybe even 2021, that there was a real problem with it because of COVID, and people. It was at a different day. Everything had been all set up, and then it fell apart at the last minute. What was the effect of that? What effect did that have on you?
So what happened again was they just counted in the cities, and we didn't realize how much. Well, we knew, but we weren't able to count the outlying areas. And Wayne, who was going to do that, wasn't available. So when people were so proud of the fact that they thought they had a really low count, we knew that wasn't true. It wasn't true at all. And then the other thing I talk about is the realization that we were counting individuals and not families, and yet there are a lot of families that were displaced. And they're not going to just hang out under the bridge with their kids. They're living in a car, if they're fortunate to have a car, or maybe in an RV, or that's the realization. Like, we found one family that didn't have a car and was 8 months homeless in 29 Palms. And I thought, how on earth did we not see them homeless in 29 Palms for 8 months? Because they were hiding.
I'd like to point out that this sheet of paper that was on every seat, it's the other side of the one that has the acronyms, has all the information about the point-in-time count at the bottom, and there are training. You have to be trained, and there's a training online coming up, and as Astrid said, they need help. And so 2 ways to share information about other sites that they might look to and join up and help. So thank you.
Steve, I'll address this to you, and feel free to delegate this if you'd like, because it's not an easy one. My perspective working up here as an architect is that although we've heard a lot today about people that are doing really important work to try and deal with the outcomes of the housing crisis, to support people that find themselves without homes. At the end of the day, the thing that solved this, although we've heard, an attempt to be like, well, this is a very broad problem, it's not just here, but I saw this happen in real time in 2019 with the passage of San Bernardino County short-term rental ordinance. And it's a problem of policy and the structure of county government, because it was pretty clear, I think, to everybody that there were going to be negative consequences from the short-term rental ordinance. They were predictable. There's no way that you can remove housing units from the long-term rental market without displacing people. And all of those things were sort of waved away which we've seen happen many times with the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors, which is majority not at all interested in what happens up here. Land use services and planning, the department which seems best equipped to look ahead and see these issues, is not a planning organization at all. They deal with their statutory requirements and processing permits, but they're never looking ahead because they're not allowed to. They aren't given the resources. But do you have any sense? I know you were on the advisory council. How do we as a community advocate for the attention and resources to make sure this doesn't happen again? Because although the problem may be abating, or the rate at which it's getting worse is slowing because of interest rates and market saturation of STRs, it's still a policy problem from my standpoint. Do you have any reasons for optimism, or where we should be putting our efforts, Steve?
Thank you, Ben. I try to always be optimistic, but I also am clear-eyed and know that it's a problem. The root of the problem, I believe, comes in the 5 districts for this huge county, these 5 distinct and diverse districts. From, if people haven't had a chance to look, I encourage you to take a look at the map underneath the screen here to the right of the stage that shows gives statistics about the size of the counties and the areas that they represent. The 4th district is very small. Here, let me just run over. It's, I think, informative to talk about this here. So we've got the 4th district is 141 square miles, totally urban. The 2nd district is pretty much all urban. It gets up into the mountains just a little bit, 177 square miles. The 5th district is 134 square miles. The 1st district, 10,042 square miles. And our district here, Supervisor Rowe's district, 9,613 square miles, with totally different demographics, land use, environmental considerations. And an idea that our board member Janet Johnston has suggested to perhaps address this is to consider creating additional planning commissions, because now there is one planning commissioner for each of the 5 districts. So we got 5 members of the planning commission. And the guy from one of these small inner city districts, they've never been out to our neck of the woods to see the project. They don't know what the site looks like. Whereas if we were to have a series of different, breaking it up into let's say a North Desert Planning Commission, an East Desert Planning Commission, a Mountain Planning Commission up for the Big Bear area, and a valley. So it's 4 separate planning commissions. And then doing it in that manner, I think that would start to create a little bit of representation. Because as it is now, it's such a wacky political organizational system that really doesn't work. And as far as making headway on short-term rental ordinances, the supervisors have indicated that they are looking, that this isn't cast in stone in terms of the ordinance itself. So I think a meeting such as this and getting the awareness such of this should hopefully start to turn the tide a bit to get them to see that there is a problem here that needs to be addressed, and structure some appropriate changes. As I said, there's STRs and there's STRs. There's hosted STRs and there's corporate STRs, and it really needs to be distinguished between the two. And I think just continuing to beat the drum and let people know. Hopefully this meeting will have made some at least the first step on this thing to make some impact on it. I see Pat Flanagan would like to say something.
Thank you. There was a brief interruption over here with a couple that came in. They happen to be homeless. They've been living in their car for 2 years. They're elderly, and they saw that this meeting posted somewhere, and they wanted to know if it dealt with the homeless. And I obviously couldn't get them to anybody because they had a meeting they had to go to. They have some kind of a VA voucher, but it doesn't do them any good. Okay, that good. I was also thinking from that, I gave them, that's what I wanted the program for. I told them to look it up online and that we would have all of this posted. So my initial suggestion is that right off we have a list of the organizations with the phone numbers and what they would, how they would contact them, so they don't have to look through this entire production.
Yeah, I thought we'd do a couple of e-blasts about this, and we're going to have one very fast that does exactly that. Put all the contact information in there in the next day or two.
If it's right up front, then they can go and look at it. But how they found out about us, that's great.
Hi. Can I just get a show of hands of who is a renter here? Cool. So usually I come to these meetings and I talk about housing at like local meetings, and I realize that everybody is a homeowner pretty much. So going forward, it's I moved here in 2019 in the fall with my friend into a 2-bedroom house in Joshua Tree. My rent was $800. It stayed $800 until July of 2022. Peter Spurr actually did my walkthrough. They put the house for sale. I got my 60-day notice in May, and it took me until January 1st to find housing, keeping up with 2 in-person jobs, and yeah, I stayed in 15 people's houses. Luckily, I have friends here. Yeah, I have good references, good credit, I have all this stuff. So, sorry, this always happens when I public speak. But yeah, super happy that I found housing, but yeah, same thing. I was taking classes at Copper Mountain. I had to drop out for the semester. Same thing with a bunch of kids in the program. Their housing went up, they lost their housing. So just making sure that when we're going forward, that when we're making these committees, that there is representation of people who are long-term renting to be in that, so that we have like the pulse on those needs. Something I've thought about a lot is short-term vacation rentals aren't going away, they're just part of it. But I do like to believe that some people are not just like super greedy, money-hungry people, that they like want to do good. So something I'd like to see is like a 5% back program, in which we educate short-term vacation rental owners about programs like Arch, programs that just need funding that they might not know about because they don't live here, or maybe they do live here and they just don't know, that they can opt in on, they can like put it on their little rental thing, and then it's like as a way, if they exist, to fund programs that exist here, resources that need money. They can raise the rent to cover it, they cannot, they can take the hit, but I think that if they're going to exist in this way, we can make them help pay for all the programs that we need funding for. Thank you.
Thank you. That is an excellent suggestion, and I think that's the obvious thought that comes to my mind is, where are the revenues from short-term rental taxes applied, and shouldn't they be applied to some nonprofits that deal with housing things? Yes, here's Astrid.
We need to finish by 2, so we do need to wrap up.
I want to thank, I know he's not here now, as Frank did give me some of that TOT money. He did. That's where the donation came from. It was $20,000.
It's the county that we don't know where the money's going.
It's good to know. Okay, we have 4 minutes here is...
Hi, this is Claudia Saul. I think if we had the two large districts as far as land use, if we would ask the Board of Supervisors to make sure our planning commission lives in one of these rural cities rather than commuting out to it, that would be helpful. When we had Paul Smith, who lived in 29 Palms, as our planning commissioner, he was very helpful with that. But if we had each two, we would then have two supervisors, and we'd only have to get a third to help some of these issues move forward. So that would be one thing, if we could get a policy for that. The other thing is, the caps are great, creating that the towns have done, but I think there also needs to take a step further and say how many of those can be built in one neighborhood, because we have a saturation in one neighborhood, and you know the governments come back and say, well, we do have a cap on this, but that doesn't help. I live in a pioneer town, and you know, somewhere getting close to 50% is STRs, so that's unbalanced, and we need to see that next thing changed, perhaps.
I would like to see, before I leave at the end of May, if we could get together, but we get our local corporations and businesses, and we have somebody, if the homeless want to come in, and anybody in the community, so we can start connecting with each other. And it doesn't happen overnight, it takes time. But this meeting is, you're the biggest one that works with everything. So why cannot we find sometime between now and then, we decide who we want to invite and actually do it with a ladder to the corporations and see what we can do? And yeah, so that's my idea. I'd like to have a big meeting before I go, because I don't get back until November. Because I want to be here.
To that end, everyone, please make sure that your email address, you've left it with us so that we can, and there is a survey on every chair, and so I encourage everyone to fill the survey out, and if that is, perhaps that would be a good thing to put on the survey. Well, everyone, thank you so very much for being here. We really appreciate it.